Back then, the army infiltrated comms of every big power in Orion, one of the cities in Uranus cluster, and found crucial data about the Shadow Order and Chaos families. It was a painful lesson, and the shady powers changed to Alpha Orbs, abyssal alternative to comms. But they were limited in ways. They couldn't act as information storages, nor could they link to the meta-net. In fact, they weren't even technology per se, but rather some kind of treasure like swords that could spit fire and arrows that could freeze space. However, due to the one single function of communication, all big powers used them. Just like now, Thomas Grant was standing in a luxurious room filled with breathtaking paintings. In front of him was a floating orb. Thomas channeled his mana into the orb. It flashed a dazzling red, and a red hologram-like image appeared. "Barbarossa, you don't seem to be well?" Thomas greeted the stout middle-aged man. "It cost a lot more than I thought." Barbarossa grunt-led. "It? You're talking about Betty's mission?" Thomas tapped his chin. Kidnapping her is costly. Cosa Brotherhood is burning its pockets for the little bitch." Barbarossa cursed. "Haha. High returns, high investments." Thomas waved his hand, earning a glare from Cosa leader. "If I didn't ask your assistance, my expenses would be far lower," the man said through gritted teeth. "Only 15% for the best intelligence of Valos," Thomas said, and walked to a shelf full of storage devices. 15% more for your shitty son's assistance." Barbarossa's voice blasted out of the Alpha Orb and almost shook the desk. "Without him, you wouldn't be able to finish the mission." Thomas grabbed a disc from the pile and tapped on it. Barbarossa was silenced with his response. There were two major obstacles to kidnapping Betty. 1. She never went to places without her bodyguards. 2. The Space Awakener bodyguard. Without Lilua's help, of them could be solved. Of course, Lilu himself didn't know his importance in the mission. "You know, Barb," Thomas tapped on the disc and a hologram popped up showing a handsome man in military uniform, Colin, Betty's father and one of the highest-ranking officers in Valos. "I'm fine with you failing the mission," Thomas said slowly. "I'm fine even if my son died due to the failure. But..." He raised his voice and pointed to the hologram. "If I make an enemy out of this man and he ends my empire, I'll make you beg for death." Colin was a formidable enemy. His only weakness, but also his greatest, was his daughter. By touching her, they were taking a big risk. If they succeed, the rewards would be so great that their strength would take a huge leap. If they failed, though, everything would be lost. Silence descended in the room as Thomas and Barbarossa glared at the hologram. "You said the same thing last time." Barbarossa rolled his eyes. Thomas put the disk storage back in its place and shook his head. "Last time, our target was only an architect. Even if Gwen is Valos' city designer, her security is nothing compared to Betty. Whatever. I have saved up enough already, I just want to buy it already. But the fucking black market is closed." Barbarossa clenched his fist and slammed his own head. "If I were the Shadow Order, I wouldn't close the black market." "Thankfully, you're not," Thomas sneered. "They're just paranoid. They're being careful. If Dreamer can find out their secret realm on Earth, he can also find it here. It's in space, for God's sake. You think he can tour the whole space?" Barbarossa looked at Thomas like he was an idiot. "Genius, he can just hack some tiny bot and follow one of us when we go to the black market." Thomas looked at Barbarossa like he was a retard. The genius had no words. "They'll open the market after more security measures. And I have to go. I have a charity in the slums." Thomas waved his hand and left the room. "Hypocritical bastard. You treat humans worse than weeds and you do charity." The gang leader cursed and cut off the contact. After a few minutes, Varian asked Boo to turn down all the surveillance in the place and had the ghost ship hack into the storage devices. Everyone avoided comms, but they couldn't avoid the technology entirely. That included surveillance cameras, automatic doors, bots, and so on. They were integral to one's life in this day and age. And it allowed Ghost Ship to sneak into this room without hassle. The storage devices weren't connected to Metanet, and were technically safe from remote hacking. That's why Thomas dared to store sensitive information in these devices. But of course, truly sensitive information wasn't stored in any device. He could have never imagined that a certain ghost AI would easily break the security of the storage devices and copy the data. We're done. The Ghost Ship sneaked out of the Grant estate. Varian had Boo study the data and present him with important points. Of course, he himself asked a few crucial questions. By the time they were done, Varian slumped on his bed watching the glittering stars. His mission was practically over by this point. Most things made sense. Lilua's words, "it'll be over by this week," gave away the time of kidnapping. On the day of Inter Academy competition. The venue was not in the Miracle Academy but in a public stadium. Security will still be tight, but Kosa Brotherhood might have discovered a loophole to exploit. After knowing that there were still 6 days, Varian relaxed. Master, what do we do now? Inform Edwina? Or record the video and show it to Betty? Boo asked excitedly as they reached the hotel Varian was staying at. Varian went silent for a few seconds before shaking his head. No. Let Betty be kidnapped. Master. Boo turned around and gave Varian a look of fear. Is this your revenge? Do I look like someone so petty? Yes. Even thought they didn't speak, the man and the ghost read each other's thoughts. Cough. Cough. Varian coughed and said with a serious expression. We'll follow the kidnappers. Huh. Essentially, all the important gangs had camps in the secret realm. And except for a select few, no one knew where the realm was. So, we'll get to the secret realm and find the piles of aura crystals. Varian stretched his arms and yawned. They're going to buy something in the black market. So the aura crystals will be sent to the black market. We'll follow them and sneak into the black market. He explained his plan. Awesome. Then I mark the secret realm and you inform the army? Waha. You'll destroy the shadow order of this cluster. You're awesome. That means, I am also a Weso. Boo floated higher and higher with each word. In the end, it was about to hit the ceiling. Wait. Varian stopped it in time. Didn't you hear them speaking? They're taking security measures against Dreamer. I'm guessing they're doing something to prevent you from marking them. They should also have a network within the secret realm that prevents any sort of location tracking. So, even if they entered the black market, they wouldn't be able to know its coordinates. Wait. Boo stopped him this time. Then what are we even sneaking in for? I am worried. Varian rubbed his forehead. Just why are the Abyssals throwing this something into black market? Something that stir up all the gangs and drive them crazy? Are you stupid, Master? They are selling that whatever thing for aura crystals. Of course, they want aura crystals. Boo replied smugly. Aura crystals. Varian's eyes narrowed. For what? Kyuk. Boo was dumbfounded. Do you still need a reason to hoard money? Did you never see rich people? I forgot. Master lived a poor life. Varian felt that Boo was turning weird, as if it was full of pity. But he didn't care about it and raised 2 fingers. Rule 2, never underestimate your enemies. Duh, whatever, Master. I just want to see some big fights coupled with explosions and probably a war too. Just say that you want to watch the world burn. Varian shook his head. Boo, see if you can find anything useful in Kosa Brotherhood and other gangs. I'm off to practice. The Ghost Ship wanders in the territories of Kosa Brotherhood, Viper Gang and others all night. Meanwhile, Varian went into his training room and sparred with the ex-assassins. As the sun rays illuminated Valos, Varian walked out of the room. With each step he took, blood spilled on the floor. By the time he reached the shower, the bleeding stopped. It's useless. He sighed as the cold water washed away his blood and sweat. Body path level 6, 1500/4000, plus 0, space path level 6, 1500/4000, plus 0, lightning path level 6, 1500/4000, plus 0, morpher path L6, 500/2000, plus 50, telepath path L6, 800/2000, plus 80, telekinetic path L6, 600/2000, plus 30. This was the result of his 2-week hard work. After the solar trial, except for body path, the rest of his divine paths were only at the peak of level 5. His enhanced path, space path and lightning path, which were also the paths the assassins awakened in, had the fastest improvement. He was already a mid-level 6 in the 3 paths. Then came the other paths. Without the aid of suitable opponents, their growth was far slower. Varian also prioritized telepath path over morpher and telekinetic. Of course, telepath path could be used in a good combination with almost any other path. But the reason he chose it was because he wanted to regain his memory. He was clearing the fog bit by bit. But if he continued at his current rate, it'd take a few years. If he got to level 7 though. These guys are already useless. I should find someone else. Varian sighed. Kidnapping a bunch of level 6 gangsters sounded pretty good. The only problem was it might end up causing a big disturbance. Level 6s weren't the strongest, but they were definitely the backbone of the gangs. I'll think about it later. Boo, did you get anything useful? As the cadets assembled in the field, Varian asked. They were supposed to visit the other side, military side already, but for some reason, it was delayed. There was a fierce fight last night. By the time I reached there, it was already over. Who fought? Nuck Gang and Soprana Gang. Varian recalled the 2 girls who fought the other day. He didn't remember their names, but he did remember their gangs were of equal strength. So, what's the result, attention students? He was cut off by the instructor. The Nuck family was destroyed last night. The Nuck family heiress is no more. The whole family? Weren't they of equal strengths? Varian frowned and scanned the crowd. The blue-haired girl, the heiress of Soprana Gang, was smirking at the announcement. No, not just a smirk. Her face was glowing with joy and more than joy, satisfaction. From time to time, she covered her mouth and giggled. She saw her rival's death and she's satisfied. Varian's thoughts spun and he immediately asked Boo to retrieve the information of the gangs from Grant's databs. Thomas Grant's spy network Obsidian was the most comprehensive of Valos. So, his database was the best of the best. It made the man proud and filled him with ambition. But he would have never thought that someone was using the very same database for purposes that would ultimately harm him. Hey, Edgar. As Varian waited for the information, a deep voice called out. Huh? Varian turned around and saw a blonde youth staring at him with a serious gaze. Following his Edgar persona at school, he simply gave an indifferent stare in response. The less he spoke, the less he would slip up. Please stay away from Betty. Viner said. I got no business with her. He said and stepped forward, but an arm obstructed him. Viner pushed his chest and said with a serious face. Betty doesn't like you. Don't sit beside her. Change your places in the class. Or what? Varian asked with a casual tone. Or, Viner held Varian's shoulder and applied pressure. I'll personally throw you out. Varian stayed silent until Viner's pressure reached level 5. Then, he exhaled lightly. Caw. Viner only felt a blur before he heard a cracking sound soon followed by a horrible pain. Arg. The cadets turned their gazes towards the tragic scream. They saw a blonde youth clutching his twisted hand as he curled and howled in pain. Right before him was a silver-haired youth with a cold face. Shouldn't have asked. Saying those words, Varian joined the line to enter the hover train. But the cadets before him gulped in fear and gave way. In their eyes, Edgar Blanc was a monster. Viner was second in the test. He was technically the second strongest. Yet, Edgar injured Viner in a flash. No one even noticed they fought. The instructor was also shocked, but he quickly recovered and announced. Be quick. The tour to military side will begin in 8 minutes. As Varian got seated and glanced out of the window, he felt a strong stare. Finally here. Turning to the side, he saw Edwina glaring at him. I came today to ask for leave. Until the competition, I won't be attending the academy. Edgar. Her eyes were spitting fire. Edwina glared at them like an angry cat and they all turned back like they didn't see her beet red face on the verge of exploding with rage. Some of them knew the actual relationship between Edgar Blanc and Edwina. They thought it was some family dispute. But to most, Edgar was a genius transfer student while Edwina was a genius alumni working as a teaching assistant. They thought he offended her somehow. After taking a deep breath, Edwina turned to the silver-haired youth and gritted her teeth. Why didn't you come to my home? Her words caused everyone to turn their gazes towards her. This time, they was full of ambiguity and curiosity. Some enthusiasts with overly creative brain already started spinning stories. In a few seconds, posts relating to a certain taboo topic was lit on the forum. Edwina didn't know this. Nor did she care. For the past 2 days, she was banging her head on the wall due to Edgar. In truth, she was on the verge of being promoted to a higher rank in the organization. This was a crucial mission. Initially, she thought it'd be easy. After seeing the newbie was a level 6, she was overjoyed. With her assistance, a level 6 could easily finish the mission. But what happened next could only be described as nightmare. Varian didn't try getting close to Betty. In fact, he even pissed her off. Now, the girl who despised everyone hated him. Worse, when she tried to contact him yesterday evening, he said he was busy. Really? What the hell was he busy with? Edwina was utterly furious. When Varian said he wanted to leave until the competition, her rage slipped past the tipping point. Do you think this is a joke? Edwina closed her eyes and said slowly. But her voice now was much, much colder. She decided, if he didn't cooperate with her, she'd beat sense into him. By disrespecting the mission, he was disrespecting the hard work of so many people. Did he really think it was easy to find out that Betty was a kidnapping target? I was busy yesterday. I tried to meet you in the morning, but you were busy. You're the sole reason I'm attending the academy today. And no, I'm treating this more seriously than you think. Varian's voice sounded in her mind, causing Edwina to flinch. He's a telepath. But from the way he injured Viner, he was also a body awakener. So, a level 6 dual awakener? So young? For a moment, the sheer shock at the realization caused her to halt. Varian smiled lightly and his voice in her head continued. I know who's going to kidnap Betty and who's the accomplice. Betty will be safe. Edwina opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked around and tapped her palm furiously. Are you kidding me? How can you know? It's my personal secret. But Betty will be unharmed. I'll need to look into this and find the bigger secrets. Unharmed? So you mean she'll be kidnapped, but you'll rescue her? Betty caught the implication of his words. Yes. It's necessary. We're done. I'll report this to the higher-ups. And stay in my sight or I'll have to neutralize you. Edwina's eyes turned indifferent. Varian sighed lightly. He knew it. She followed rules to the last letter. Someone like her wouldn't believe his words or accept his approach. Well, no sane human with an iota of common sense would believe him. That's why, Enigma, my mission, stopping the kidnapping, is incorrect. I propose changing it. I'll be using the kidnapped as the medium to get access to black market. I know that other members of the Guardians and Athena agents are trying to do the same, but I want to get involved. And due to my uniqueness, I have a good shot at finding what others couldn't. So, yeah, I just wanted to inform you. Also, say hi to Sia for me. My memory recovery in on the way. I'll meet her soon. Yours truly, Dreamer. He sent a message her to earlier today. To be honest, when he typed "the mission is incorrect," Varian felt his chest swell with pride. It was like a student attending an exam and correcting the questions. If this wasn't a moment of pride, he didn't know what was. Edwina looked up from her calm and emphasized again. Do not test my patience. Stay in sight, and I won't hurt you. I just informed the higher-ups. I informed the highest up. Varian's voice sounded in her mind. Highest up? Edwina wondered if her vocabulary was lacking. Was that even a word? Whatever. Stay in my sight. Varian turned his head and gazed out of the window. Once Enigma's message came, Edwina would calm down. Trying to convince her now was pointless. The hover train quickly was a few dozen meters above the ground and dashed through the special route. It passed below the floating buildings, along the skyline of bustling districts and above the dirty slums. In a few minutes, it was at the edge of the city. Since Valos City was in the shape of a disc, when they reached the edge of the city, Varian could see the dark and empty space. The train passed through a huge security checkpoint and entered the city on the other side of the disc. For a split second, Varian felt like he was jolted out of his seat before things turned back to normal. Gravity. He noted. The gravity was always towards the surface of the city. He didn't know how they achieved it, but these days, everyone took it for granted. We've reached the military city. Please cooperate with the security check. An AI announced. Varian glanced at the ring on his finger and Boo understood. It silently disappeared. Soon, numerous bots entered the train and scanned them one by one. Then, soldiers in offensive posture appeared and personally checked them. Even their storage rings were searched. Submit your comms. If you're found breaking any rules, expect heavy penalties. The military court isn't lenient. A stoic soldier with orange beard informed and waved his hand. Follow me. So, regardless of the chaos in the city, the army guarded the region with utmost diligence. It wasn't just teleportation formations, there were also crucial supplies like weapons, food, important materials among other things. And that's why, you shouldn't take an extra step, not touch anything you aren't supposed to. Am I clear? The officer named Henry said in a sonorous tone. Yes, sir. The 17th batch cadets said and got off the hover train. What was presented in front of them was a world filled with gray and black buildings that stretched into the sky. There were shockwaves in the sky from time to time as the space shuttles practiced their formations. As the cadets stepped on the black road, its surface flickered and a few discs appeared under their feet. Henry tapped his comm and they all dashed forward gazing at their surroundings with curiosity. Now we're in the outer region. Henry said. This place typically holds training fields for the enlisted, but all soldiers up to level 3 practice here. Saying so, he snapped his finger. The huge black dome to their right suddenly became transparent. The cadets opened their eyes wide as they saw a huge complex full of floating spheres. Each sphere had soldiers fighting in small groups. What really came as a shock was the teamwork. Working together, they were far stronger than the sum of their individual strengths. The better the teamwork, the more evident this became. Some divine paths work well in combination. For example, telepaths can control the enemies from the rear while body awakeners and morphers take on the enemies in close combat. Elementals can act as close combat, but they're mostly suitable for long-range attacks. Henry said as they moved forward. A gigantic cube complex turned transparent and they saw hundreds of soldiers flickering in and out of existence trying to attack a huge tortoise beast. In the early stages, Space Awakeners can act as good assassins. During the mid-levels, they can act as good controllers from the rear. They also play a crucial role in rescuing the ones near death. Henry tapped his comm and they moved forward once again. Slowly, he explained the general tactics and strategies followed in the battle. And showed the facilities they had for training the soldiers. By the time of graduation, if you can reach low level 5, after a quick training, you'll be promoted. Your training resources will be higher than many senior soldiers of lower levels. Henry said with an encouraging face. If you want to change your life, make the best of this opportunity. Many cadets straightened their backs and nodded vigorously. As children of poor and middle-class families, this was their only chance at changing their fate. Yes, sir. Varian looked at Edwina beside him and rolled his eyes. She managed to convince Henry somehow. Now, we're entering the inner region. Henry said, and everyone felt like they were suddenly pulled and suddenly stopped, causing them to almost tumble down on the disc. Only a few didn't budge, including Varian, Lilia, Viner and of course, Edwina. Henry glossed over the various facilities and from time to time, allowed them to question. He skipped the sensitive information and answered the rest. In a few hours, they saw many dueling grounds, training facilities that made use of aura concentration formations on a large scale, pilots performing incredible feats with space shuttles and of course, heard the famous slogan from the meeting. Hope in our souls lasts forever. Hearing the heartfelt shouts of the soldiers, the cadets also shouted. Hope in our souls lasts forever. This slogan was born during the darkest times of humanity, when abyssals invaded the planets and when humans had to live in the bunkers, and fight with all their lives. The connectivity between planets was severed and every day, hundreds of millions of humans died. The war ravaged the planets and the end of humanity seemed inevitable. Those moments of despair birthed this slogan. Hope in our souls lasts forever. Varian recalled his personal hardships and shouted along with everyone. We've covered all the parts of inner region. I hope you all work hard and enlist into the military. Henry said and looked at the 30-odd cadets of 17th group. Any questions? What is in the core group? A girl asked with a timid voice. Louder. What is in the core group? She yelled. Henry nodded in approval and said. There is one S grade and one X grade facility. S and X grades meant second highest and highest level of protections. Are teleportation formations the X grade? A boy with glasses asked. Yes. Henry nodded. Then what is the S grade facility? The boy continued. The colonel of the city. Colonel? Most of the cadets were confused. Henry paused for a moment and shrugged. It's equivalent to the city's central hardware. It's responsible for gravity, defense and other things. Then shouldn't it be X grade, sir? If something happens and gravity changes, it'd be too problematic. An energetic girl asked. Henry's stoic face flashed a smile. Even thought it's only an S grade facility. It's completely made of durasium. The cadets were suddenly silenced. They even nodded vigorously. Wait, what? Varian also nodded, but he had no clue. He didn't even finish his first year, damn it. How was he supposed to know this stuff? Master, this is from the syllabus of your first semester. You asked me to write your exams. Of course, you wouldn't know. Boo suddenly said, causing Varian to almost cough out blood. You can bash me later, but what's durasium? Varian asked as they traveled back to the hover train. Durasium is one of the strongest alloys in the Federation. It's made only a decade ago, but it's already used in important facilities. I see. There's no problem with our gravity then. Varian shrugged and boarded the hover train. Today, January 31st, there will be 3 more chapters. We're on the verge of reaching top 25, please support with gifts if you can. If we reach top 25, there will be a 10-chap mass release next month. I don't mind. Lilu said lightly. Betty glared at him and Lilu gave her an apologetic smile. Good. Then you can start practicing. Edwina said and sat on a nearby bench. We just got dropped off from the military region and you tell us we're a team and you even want us to practice right now. Betty muttered and looked at Edwina with a disdainful expression. You bet on my team, right? Pathetic. I'm rich. I wouldn't resort to such things. Edwina lied with a straight face. Heh. You don't even wear top brands. Who are you kidding? Betty continued to mock her. Edwina wanted to bitch slap her, but held back. Mission is important. Mission is important. We can train at my private house, Betty. Lilu proposed. I wanted to show you the white bear I raised. After practice, you can play with it. Really? There are only 3 such bears in entire cluster. You really want to show me that bear? Betty looked at him with intense eyes. Really? Lila nodded with a kind smile. Then let's go. She cheered and held his hand. Lila turned to Varian. Edgar, if we can practice and strengthen our teamwork, beating the other academies is easy. Then he turned to Edwina. Of course, since Miss Edwina is so concerned, you can come and guide our practice. No. Yes. Yes, what? Edwina nodded before turning to Varian with wide eyes. I have stuff to do. You guys can go. Varian said and under the incredulous gaze of Edwina, walked out of the gate. Arrogant bastard. Betty cursed and got into her hover car. 3 women in gray clothes followed her closely. 3 level 7 bodyguards. As his butler opened the door, Lilu also got into the car and left. Varian and Edwina went to Edwina's home. Ka. The space around Varian suddenly stiffened. Edgar, give me one reason to not think you're a traitor whose goal is to fail this mission. Edwina said in a low voice filled with killing intent. Varian tried to destroy the space with his body, but it was too durable. After all, he was only a mid-level 6 enhanced while Edwina was a peak level 6 space awakener. Of course, she wasn't doing her best, but it was still the attack of a peak level 6. Why do you come up with such random excuses and expect me to believe them? Do I look like a fool? You look furious. Varian thought and channeled the lightning mana in his body. Zap. Zap. Kacha. Under the combined might of his lightning and body powers, the frozen space was cracked open and Varian stepped out, dumbfounding Edwina. T3 paths level 6. Not even 20. If you're so talented, why are you playing such cheap tricks? Just say you don't want to do the mission. Edwina was first shocked, but then said to him with an angered face. Varian didn't know how to explain. He didn't trust Edwina to give her the information about the Grant family. If someone learned that Grant family's database was hacked, then they might link it to Dreamer. From then, things might turn for the worse. Cling. His comm buzzed right then and the message made him sigh in relief. You are free to do what you deem right, but if you don't show the results, you will be penalized. The original mission still stands. You are no longer part of it. Just one rule. Don't die. It'll be too much of a headache for me. Protect yourself at all costs. Even the mission. Enigma. Cling. The next second, Edwina's comm rang and she read the mission. Fuck. The redhead angrily cursed and looked at Varian. Are you the son of Blue Flash or what? They made a new mission for you. Who the fuck are you? I'm a newbie. Varian shrugged. Like I'll believe it. Edwina rolled her eyes and clutched her forehead. Anyway, you're out of the mission. I'll need to think of another solution. God damn. Varian coughed lightly and slipped out after an insincere apology. So, this is the site? Shortly after, Varian looked at the ruins below the ghost ship and frowned. A few miles of land was completely covered in ice along with occasional burns here and there. There were obvious traces of fire and ice mana in the air. The ice mana, however, was much heavier than the fire. This was the site for where the Nuk Gang and Soprana Gang fought. Nuk Gang was wiped out by Soprana Gang. The ice guys won over the fire ones. Master, according to Grant family, the leaders of both gangs reached the peak of level 7 last year. They were roughly of equal strengths. Then, Varian felt the obvious difference in the mana. Even though it's been a whole day, there were still obvious traces in the air. One thing was certain. It was only two auras clashing with each other, and the ice mana was far more dominant than fire. In fact, there were only a few traces of scorched ground at some places. The land was literally covered in ice. It didn't look a fight between equals. Master, one of them is certainly a level 8. Boo said after a while. I think so too, but how? Varian rubbed his chin and wondered. Going from peak level 7 to level 8 in 1 year? That's too fast even for geniuses. These gangster leaders were no geniuses. They reached peak level 7 in their 60s. It's impossible for either of them to reach level 8 in a mere year. Varian thought back to everything, the new item in black market, the increased kidnappings and the frenzy of gangs, and it finally hit him. Abyssals are playing with fire. They were much unluckier their Valor's counterpart, Weiss family, who despite steep decline were still alive. Orion was under the influence by 4 drug companies. Though they weren't unanimously ruling the city, as long as they didn't cross a few red lines, they had no opposition in the city. It came no surprise to Varian that these 4 drug companies also had a deep-rooted intelligence network. After enough sneaking in and out, and many trials, he finally found the database of the 4 companies. It was only then did he understand why Thomas Grant held himself in such high regard. A single Grant family's intelligence network was equivalent to these 4 companies. They are going to target a high military officer, Cirque? Varian had Boo flip through the database and finally found the target. In fact, the database didn't have much data about kidnapping. There were no records about the previously kidnapped targets. Only the current ones were present. Varian suspected that they were deleting the past records periodically. So, he only found the record of 1 kidnapping target. Cirque. Age, 70 level 8 ice path weakness, his son, his reputation. There were multiple files each dedicated to one goal, his bio, people deployed around him 24/7. Neutralizing actions against him. Varian read through the files and sighed deeply. Boo, is all this info correct? He asked offhandedly. I can't find detailed info and about many secretive things here, Master. The information network here is just as bad as Valos. But whatever I could check matched with these files. Cirque is a very generous man. He donates to schools and orphanages. He also funded several drug rehabilitation centers. Boo said. Varian fell silent for a few seconds. Colin on Valos, and Cirque on Orion. Both of them were high-ranking officers. Why target them? They have a high net worth, Master. Just killing a few monsters gives them many karma points. If they can work for it, they'll also gain many aura crystals. Forget big businesses, they're the richest bunch of these cities. Varian exhaled lightly and nodded. Let's collect all information first. While there's a plan going around Cirque, no action seems to be taken. We can come back later. He said and drove Ghost Ship out of Orion City. Truth be told, he was tempted to solve Cirque's problem. After all, an honest and generous military officer being targeted by these scum, it was unbearable. But Varian had a bigger plan in mind, find out the motives of Abyssals. His interference in Orion might alert them to his presence and change the status quo. He didn't want that. Thus, the man and the ghost began their trip to visit each and every city in the Uranus cluster. Their goal was clear. Collect the information about the kidnapping/threats/lures happening or plane to happen. It was taking longer than expected. I almost slipped up. Thanks to Enigma, or I might be in trouble. I should be careful. Varian rubbed his forehead and looked at the message in his comm. Edwina said you had both body and mind powers. It's impossible to awaken in two paths of same avenue. She also reported that you awakened in lightning path. Varian, I know you're not normal, but try to hide it as much as possible. I am considered an anomaly, but you are something different altogether. I covered up saying you only awakened in mind, lightning path and gravity path. Fortunately, gravity path can also be used to explain you breaking that guy's bones in school and you breaking out of her space lock. But, your actions are worrying Sia. She's nagging me all day. I can't believe I'm saying this again, but stay safe. Or I'll have to drag you back to Earth. Enigma. Varian read the letter and titled his head. She doesn't show any emotions in person, does she? No, Master. Boo answered. Then why the hell do I feel her emotions through her messages? Varian wondered. However, he quickly shook his head. It must be me imaging things. For some reason, despite stating it was because of Sia, I felt that she was worried about me. Impossible. I don't even know who the fuck she is. Throwing them out, he thought back to the real issue. My bad. I should have noticed that I showed both body and mind path. But in my defense, I never had any trouble in awakening paths of the same avenue. You blaming me and me blaming myself is fine, but the real culprit is silent. System, host, you're too shameless. In the end, even System decided to defend itself. It was minding its job and suddenly, its host decided to accuse it. Was there still any justice remaining in this solar system? Sure enough, it was a good decision to let Devis to go extinct. The next day after military region trip, huh? Are you fucking kidding me? This trash is going to join us? Betty clutched her head and screamed like she was witnessing the end of the world. Yes. Edwina nodded with a tired face. Hello Betty. You're looking as sweet as ever. Viner smiled awkwardly and greeted. Too much simping. Edwina sighed and compared Viner to Varian. Their names differed by a litter, but their attitudes differed by miles. As opposed to Viner, who went above and beyond to please Betty, Varian didn't give a single fuck about her despite her being his mission. Was it arrogance? Or was it his confidence? Even now, she didn't believe in his words. I know the kidnapper and the accomplice. I'll let Betty be kidnapped, but she'll be unharmed. This was absurd and narcissistic. But the same narcissist was also less than 20 years old and level 6 in 3 freaking paths. Of course, she had a doubt later on. How could he awaken in both body and mind paths? That's impossible. She inquired her higher-ups and after a long pause, they finally gave her the answer. He wasn't a body awakener. He awakened in mind, lightning, and gravity paths. After that bastard left, she scrambled left and right before finally remembering this guy. To be honest, Viner was actually her first pick before she was informed of Varian's entry 2 weeks ago. Viner, aren't you too weak? Snapping her out of her thoughts were Lilua's arrogant remarks. The green-haired boy stood beside Betty with crossed arms and sneered at Viner. Weak? Viner's simping face was gone and his aura rose. Betty's expression changed and she opened her mouth in surprise. This strength, almost catching up with Lilua's mid-level 5. How could a person from normal background be so powerful? They were evil. They helped gangs kidnap people from rich background. Yes. He is from normal background. He is trash. Betty gritted her teeth and looked at him with disgust and hatred. I don't want to go through that again. I hate these people. Lilu, if you defeat him, I'll go on a date with you. Viner's and Edwina's expressions changed drastically upon hearing her words. Viner wanted to talk her out of it, but Lilu turned into a snake and whipped his tail. Deal, Betty. Lilo grinned in his half-man, half-snake form. Fuck you. Let's fight. Viner's hair spiked as lightning shot out of his body. It wasn't always like this. The mountains that used to stand tall on this land were long flattened by the punches of body awakeners. The rivers that used to flow with vitality were evaporated by the fierce fire awakeners. The beautiful greenery was destroyed by the ruthless lightning awakeners. The volcanoes, active and passive, were destroyed by the mighty water awakeners. As the red blood and green blood spilled across the land, the ground turned yellow. The wasteland came to be known as the Yellow Desert, the resulting color of red and green blood. Like every day, the human soldiers were facing a short battle in one area of the Yellow Desert. At normal times, this would be thought of as a daily operation. Skirmishes, assassinations, short battles, salami slicing and blitzkrieg and so on were an everyday affair. But today was special. Not in a good way. Charge D5. Charge. Let's kill the mother plant. Squad A23, assist B112. Take down the children plants. Space Awakeners. Space Awakeners. Get your asses moving. Assassinate. Assassinate. Tens of thousands of human soldiers were spread across the battlefield. The members of each squad were instructed by their captains, and captains of each squad were instructed by the lieutenants. Squads formed platoons, platoons formed companies, companies battalions, regiments, brigades, and finally a legion of 10,000 strong men. At the moment, every officer in the hierarchy was trying their best, issuing instructions to take down the fierce enemy that suddenly appeared. In the battlefield, there weren't just 10,000 humans and an equal number of abyssals. There were also dozens of large, monstrous plants on the abyss side. Sequoia, they were called. A group of plant species reared by the abyssals. They all cultivated in the morpher plant path, and almost all of them transformed into a plant called Physegola after transformation. Physegola was a fearsome enemy. It created small copies of itself called feists. Each of these small copies had only a portion of Physegola's strength. But their number more than made up for it. And right now, the humans were facing a few dozen level 8 Physegolas. The result? Ka. Dust rose into the air and the ground was blasted into pieces. As fire, water, lightning and rocks flew over the fighters, purple-colored plant-like entities lunged at humans. Roar. Roar. These purple body plants, feists, had a large mouth, long branches filled with red thorns. Their roots morphed into a sledge and they dashed into the human army with a reverberating roar. Then, they slaughtered. Each feist had a strength of a level 6. And level 6 was important for every battlefield. RL-34 Planetoid was a planetoid with a level 9 commander and quite a few high awakeners. Even then, level 6 were the backbone for most operations. But those backbones were slapped into pieces of blood and flesh as the feists extended their branches and whipped them to abrupt death. Boom. Boom. Arg. A squad of 6 was instantly obliterated by the feists. Their vine-like branches broke the strong body of body awakeners, resisted the fireballs, didn't cower under the mental attacks. All of them were level SXS. The same scenario played across the battlefield as hundreds of level SXS were quickly killed. As the situation went from worse to nightmarish, a group of level 8 awakeners cut their way through the battlefield and reached the Physegola, the mother plant. Shah and Jah. The captain said, and the 2 body awakeners shot out of the team, blocking off the level 8's abyssals that were about to rescue the mother plant. May and Yumi. The captain ordered, and the 2 elementalists, fire and lightning, flew into the air and set up huge shields. The fire hammers, lightning spears and ice arrows directed at them were swiftly blocked. Noah, assistant me. We have only shot. Hanyu turned towards the gravity awakener and said. Yes, Cap. Noah nodded and his gravity sense locked onto the plant. He changed their relative gravities and in the next instant, his body was pulled towards the monster plant. I hope we can get through. Hanyu muttered, and her mental power penetrated the gigantic purple plant in the distance. Roar. Shriek. The mother plant shrieked in pain as it felt its consciousness was stabbed with prickly needles. Its connection with its children, Feist's, was strained, and in that moment, its 20-odd children stiffened momentarily on the battlefield. That meant death. 16 of them were obliterated by the human soldiers who retailed swiftly. Shriek. The mother plant's body trembled with rage. Its senses caught onto Hanyu in the distance. The woman was a dual awakener. Or as a mind awakener, she wouldn't have entered this deep. Hanyu charged lightning mana into a dazzling spear and shot it at the mother plant. Right then, the mother plant retaliated. Shwa! It whipped its long branch, and in an instant, it crossed a few miles, reaching the mind awakener. Not so fast. A voice sounded from its right, and the gravity skyrocketed all of a sudden. Crack. The ground sunk in an instant, and cobweb-like cracks, with the mother plant as the center, spread for miles. Scree. The branch that was a few meters away from Hanyu before it bent down and penetrated the ground, missing the dual awakener. Hanyu looked up and saw the mother plant was only slightly bent under the pressure. The monster didn't give up and whipped its branches against Captain Noah. Humph. Hanyu directed the lightning spear in the air and shot it at the mouth of the giant thing. Unlike other plants, its mouth was its major weakness. Screech. The mother plant forcibly moved through the heavy gravity and flipped in the air, and was about to dodge the lightning spear. In midair, it lashed its branches at Noah with all its strength. Noah changed the gravity of his body and his figure blurred. In a split second, he was already hundreds of meters away from the mother plant. But the branches were right behind him. Noah had an incomparably solemn face as he channeled all his gravity power and forcibly adjusted the gravity of the mother plant. Screech. The mother plant suddenly felt a huge pull towards a certain region. As the lightning spear neared it, its body was forcibly shifted back into its trajectory and was about to hit its central body. Cap. Zap. The lightning bolt flickered and changed its direction at the last moment, reaching the mother plant's mouth in the blink of an eye. Boom. The lightning bolt smashed the mother plant's mouth into pieces and traveled through its huge body, electrocuting it and destroying every bit of its life. Caw. The mother plant died and its remaining 4 children withered instantly. Ha! As Hanyu sighed in relief, 2 crackling sounds caused her to turn around. Kacha. Kacha. The lightning and fire barriers blocking off the Abyssal's attacks were broken. The elementalists Mei and Yumi had a pale face as they faced 3 level 8 Abyssals. Boom. Boom. The ground shook as 2 bodies crashed and created a huge crater. Sha and Ja lay on the ground as they coughed out blood. They were facing 4 level 8 Abyssals. Quick. Hanyu yelled into her calm schwa. An ice spear shot at Sha, and a fire dragon was about to devour Ja when the space suddenly fluctuated. A man appeared in front of them and blocked the space. Ka. The space creaked and his lock was about to break. Stop him. The Abyssals targeted him. The man didn't flinch under the pressure and grabbed Sha and Ja. Boom. When the combined attacks reached his position and exploded the land into pieces, he was long gone. Arg. Mei and Yumi were also taken away, the Space Awakeners. Shortly, Noah was also gone. The 6 Abyssals attacked Hanyu together, and this time, even if Space Awakeners appeared, she would still die. Is this the end? Did I live my life properly? Hanyu attacked their minds and set up a lightning shield. The intensity of their attacks dropped, but it was still way more powerful than her. What's more, if a Space Awakener appears to save her, even they would die. At least I am going to die well. Hanyu sighed. The Feists were killing too many level SXS. If this continued, the army would sooner or later face a severe shortage of level SXS, and it won't be long before the Abyssals gain a strong edge over the Planetoid. Closed her eyes and waited for the inevitable to happen. The pain didn't come. Huh. Her eyes shot open and she saw the attacks paused in midair and were struggling to move forward. Not just here, but everywhere in the battlefield, the High Awakeners that were in danger were inexplicably saved. They all had the same thought. Is she here? Hanyu's heart skipped a beat and she glanced above. Her mind sense instantly reached the atmosphere of the planet and reached the outer space. There, she saw a beautiful woman facing a female abyssal. Sovereign Irene. Hanyu gasped. A/N, recently, there was a review stating Volume 4 has many fillers. Just trust me a bit, the world building will be useful and even necessary for this arc. At the moment, she looked innocent and harmless. But in reality, she was insidious and ruthless. Irene rushed to the RL-34 planetoid after learning about the appearance of Sequoia plants. But Despair Queen, the ruler of Despair Abyss and her archival appeared just in time. Thankfully, Irene was still a moment early. For a sovereign, even that little time was significant. Irene already used her gravity powers and secured the High Awakeners. As for level SXS and below, there were thousands of them and she had her limits. Her choice was the High Awakeners. If only Despair Queen was a moment late, then perhaps. Oya blaming me now? Why should we interfere in the kids' fight? Despair Queen smiled and narrowed her eyes. Boom! Despair Queen's body vanished and the space she was previously standing at twisted wildly. Then, like it was crushed by a force, cracks appeared and the space collapsed. The shockwaves from the spread outwards, some traveling to the planetoid and others asteroids. Ka! Ka! The shockwaves traveled for almost 100 miles before they hit the planetoid, but when they did, it seemed like the herald of an apocalypse. RL-34 had only one supercontinent. But once the shockwaves struck, the world map suddenly had small and medium islands. There were great rifts everywhere. New lakes were formed, mountain ranges were destroyed and every awakener in the 100-mile vicinity of the attacks suffered serious damage. If they weren't at least level 4, they died on spot. Tens of thousands of soldiers from both sides were instantly killed and the numbers were only rising with each moment. Fall back to the bases. Fall back, I say. Evacuate. Evacuate. Both humans and abyssals didn't bother fighting as they withdrew to their respective borders. Of course, the High Awakeners still remained active as they locked onto each other. To think that this scene is repeating again. Irene sighed and summoned the artifact. Hee hee. You can't defeat me with your power anyway. Let's destroy this planetoid, how about it? Despair Queen proposed with a smile. I can't send you off with my power, but, Irene's body flashed a blinding light and a sleek white armor covered her body. The moment it appeared, Irene felt her gravity power rise significantly. The warm armor gave her a sense of security and filled her with additional strength. Due to Heaven's will, abyssals had a strength reduction on planets and moons. But not on planetoids and space. As such, while humans could drive abyssals off planets and moons, they were in stalemate on planetoids and space. But the strength of abyssals was in fact higher than of humans. Until artifacts were used. Your crystal armor is way better than my vine armor. Despair Queen's eyes flashed with envy as she licked her lips. But your base strength isn't as good as mine. The abyssal woman laughed and her body flashed a dazzling green. The next moment, a huge tree 10 kilometers tall was standing in front of Irene Nile. It overshadowed her by many, many, many folds. I'll kill you one day. Irene Nile muttered and her armor flashed a white light. Gotcha. The asteroids across hundreds of miles broke apart and turned into sharp spikes. Boom. Then breaking the speed limit multiple times, they shot at the huge tree. Ha ha ha. Despair Queen's laughter resounded throughout the planetoid as the huge tree simply waved its branches. The branches turned into red vines and extended for dozens of miles. Like muscles flexed, the branches swelled and transformed into heavy vines filled with poisonous thorns all over. Then with a simple flap, hundreds of vines covered the tall tree and shielded it from the lethal bullets. Caw! Caw! Despite blocking a significant portion of the bullets, the shield couldn't hold most. So, when the vine shield was removed, the tall tree was riddled with holes all over. Violet liquid spilled out of the tall tree as Despair Queen's breath weakened slightly. The previous attack would have pulverized even level 9s into pieces of flesh, but to take down a sovereign, it was far from enough. Pest race! Despair Queen cursed. The tall tree wriggled and all the bullets were expelled. Not even a second passed, and every injury of the Despair Queen healed. Plant morphers, you guys are fucking annoying. Irene cursed as she channeled her gravity power and locked onto Despair Queen. The space suddenly started shaking and Despair Queen's expression changed. Each of her body parts were experienced different, but dangerous amounts of gravity. She lost control of some of her vine branches. They were attracted to the midsection of her body, the gravity acting on them dictated them to, and following its influence, those vines fell towards her midsection and slapped heavily. Gah! Despair Queen howled in pain. A small river of violet blood was formed from the huge wound on the tree's midsection. The wound wriggled and was about to heal. Not under my watch. Irene spat and waved her hand. The gravity on the vines changed and they were repelled by the midsection. Then it reversed again and they were forcibly pushed towards the midsection. Stop! Despair Queen yelled and pulled her other vines to block the attack. Caw! Caw! The vines collided with each other and the ones under Irene's control were completely destroyed. Despair Queen wasn't in a good mood as a new set of vines went out of control despite her best attempts. You! Caw! Caw! Their fight continued for hours as neither of them were willing to give up. Even though Despair Queen was injured from time to time, her planty powers meant she healed almost instantly. Their stalemate was finally broken when Despair Queen withdrew, causing Irene to sigh in relief. It played a big role in the battle, and if not for it, Irene would have been heavily injured. Cough. Cough. She covered her mouth and coughed out blood. She was still injured though. Her white armor was stained in red as blood continued to spill out of her body. Irene channeled her gravity power and redirected the gravity of the blood, stopping the bleeding. Now I can finally rest. She stretched her arms and caught the glimpse of her storage ring. Fine. With a bad premonition, she checked her customized storage ring and picked her comm. The latest message was from 10 minutes ago by a level 9 planetoid commander. Sovereign Irene, in XA-97 Planetoid, there is a bunch of Sequoia. Fuck. Irene cursed and channeled the gravity power. As she was about to accelerate herself towards the planetoid, her innards roiled and she felt like someone knocked her out of breath. Cough. Cough. Spitting out blood, her complexion was pale as her armor's original color. It hurt. But more than the physical pain, the words she were about to utter caused her to clench her fists and close her eyes. Minimize the losses. Yes. I'll do my best to get only 2,000 level 6 casualties. The reply wasn't blaming or accusing. It was simply one of acceptance. Perhaps, even the commander didn't expect her to come ahead and help. There was always the option of reinforcements in the inner planets, but here? The reinforcements were stretched and they had issues like random level 9 abyssals attacking. Irene Nile summoned her space shuttle and without delay rested in the healing pod. Despair Queen left not because she was too injured, but because she was too tired. I'm sorry. As her mind hovered between dream and reality, a little boy's face surfaced in her mind. Mom. Mom. Little Vicky called out in fear. Vicky. Irene yelled and looked around for him. In her fit of anxiety, she destroyed the healing pod and dented the reinforced room walls. The floor had puddles of precious healing liquid that could cause any high awakeners to fight, yet Irene Nile couldn't even pay attention to what she had done. Her memories flashed and she saw a little boy waving at her with a cheerful smile. "Mom. Are you a sovereign?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Then I'll also be one." "Why?" "Because Dad isn't. So, when you go outside, he can't accompany you." "I don't want you to be lonely, Mom." Her husband laughed it off, but she felt his pain. He was only a level 7, yet they married against all expectations. The stronger she grew, the more ridicule he drew. They said she should pick a better husband. Or at least pick a couple of them. Irene didn't. She wasn't Vianne. He was the one who supported her through thick and thin. He was her pillar of support. And she only wanted to be with him. Despite having one husband, her responsibilities made it impossible for them to spend time in peace. In the end, even natural pregnancy was a problem because she couldn't afford to be weak for a couple of months. When they finally had Vicky late in their lives, she was already a sovereign. Her happiness was immeasurable and she was filled with energy every day. But soon, Pluto War happened. Her decision to support military drew mixed opinions, but she did what she thought was right. Neptune was saved from being the second Pluto. But Uranus paid the price. Everyone expected Abyssals to retaliate. But no one expected how much they're willing to pay. When they realized, it was already too late. The first casualty of the revenge was her husband. He was trying to protect Vicky. The second was little Vicky himself. Not just that, the Nile family, children and grandchildren of her sisters and brothers also suffered heavy losses. "I'm sorry." Irene closed her eyes and whimpered. Her shoulders shook and she covered her face. For a moment, she allowed herself to be weak. After wiping away the tears, she put on an indifferent expression and commanded her space shuttle. She couldn't show weakness to others. "Go to where we last left off." "Yes, Sovereign Irene." The space shuttle traveled away from the planetoids and towards an area very close to the abyss. This was a special region with asteroids. There were many, many asteroids varying from the size of a basketball to being 1/25 of moon. Irene looked at the asteroids and spread her gravity sense. She could feel the changes in hundreds of miles easily. "Proceed at regular speed." She instructed and the space shuttle continued to move past the asteroids at a high speed. "Sequoia, Sequoia, where are you?" Irene muttered as her eyes flashed with killing intent. Those plants were only recently introduced. They didn't cause much damage to level 8s, but they killed too many level 6s. After her investigation, Irene concluded that they weren't brought from Despair Abyss. They were being grown somewhere here. After a few days of searching, she found a couple of them. "Stop!" She suddenly yelled and her figure disappeared from the ship. In the next moment, she appeared on a huge asteroid that could hold 50 football fields. In the cracks of the asteroid, she found a green plant with a big mouth. "Paw!" With a clench of her fist, the gravity in the plant's body parts twisted. Key, it couldn't even scream before it turned into a paste. Irene spread her gravity sense and was about to leave. "Huh." But she felt a trace of prana left in the air. No. They didn't leave any traces any other time. Why now? Despite her doubts, she boarded her spaceship and followed the traces. Unexpectedly, she found 20 Sequoia one by one. The one she found at the beginning was the weakest. The farther she went, the stronger the Sequoia became. Irene lost herself in the process. Level 5. Level 6. Level 7. The strongest Sequoia so far, level 8. If she could kill off all level 8 Sequoia, then there wouldn't be such level 6 casualties anymore. As Irene's lips curled up in anticipation, an unexpected warning came. "Sovereign Irene, this is a danger zone." What? She felt the surroundings and her eyes widened in surprise. They were only a couple of minutes away from the abyss. There was abyss patrol going to and fro. The only reason she wasn't caught was that her space shuttle, it was one of the finest in the Federation. Irene felt the traces of Sequoia and her gaze fell on a group of asteroids. They were all connected to each other and formed various patterns. She could sense rich prana coming from a few asteroids. If she destroyed them. Go back. Irene sighed deeply. The prana traces were so obvious. This was 99% a trap. Her life was no longer hers to risk, she needed to live for everyone who's under her protection. Calling teams wasn't on her agenda either. They'd be found out by the Abyssals and a battle would ensue. No matter how many teams she brought, there was no chance they had any chance fighting right in front of the Abyss. Perhaps if she sneaked in alone, perhaps. Irene shook her head and slipped into another healing pod. For now, let me rest. But then it finally hit him. In a particular city, there was no way to know for sure which power had the role of intelligence gatherer. In fact, such organizations tend to hide. Like Grant family, everyone only knew them as famous financial investors. So, Varian and Boo had to undertake the arduous task of finding clues to which power might be the information gatherers. It'd typically be a long list complied after an hour of work. Then they'd need to check them one by one. It was excruciating. Varian didn't participate in the repetitive task and left it to the expert AI. Exploiting the info gathered and some monitoring, Varian caught gangs when they were in conflict. And he kidnapped a couple of peak level 6 awakeners that were supposed to be dead. For example, 2 days ago, a level 7 slapped a training hall to rubbles. Everyone in it died. Except for 2 peak level 6 who were saved by Varian. Boo's persistence got them closer and closer to getting the info of the 20 cities. His persistence finally gave him the training bags he needed. Since they were all criminals who committed murder and rape, Varian didn't feel any guilt in using them for training. Thus, he now had a peak level 6 training bag for every divine path. He decided to focus on the divine paths that were behind others and started training. During the breaks, he'd inquire Boo about the situation and if needed, give some instructions. Thus, on the 6th day, they'd borrowed the databases of 17 cities, including Valos. These databases all had one prime target, like Betty's father Colin in Valos and Cirque in Orion. These high-ranking officers were the targets. But, what do you mean there is none? Varian frowned at the white ghost. He was currently wearing white training clothes and was about to go train. Of course, they'd be stained red after every session. But Boo's report caused him to stop. They just don't have a prime target. No high-ranking military officer is targeted. Boo pointed to the 3 cities and said. What about other targets? Any peculiarities? Varian leaned against the sleek black wall of the training room and raised a brow. Well. Boo's eyes flashed with binary digits before it nodded. Some scientists, some researchers, some architects. A few holograms popped up, showing the details of said targets. Are they related to any high-ranking military officer? Varian crossed his hands and asked. No. Sighing lightly, Varian checked his comm and shook his head. It's almost time. We should get going. Boo nodded lightly. Its master's plan was based on the premise of them following Betty's kidnappers. They needed to be on the scene. The ghost ship was en route to Valos. Do you have the confidence we can win? Lilu asked with a smile. Humph. As if those pets stood any chance. Betty raised her chin in pride. Her gaze on Lilu revealed her infatuation and admiration. Betty, you don't have to stress yourself. I'll take care of them and protect you. Viner patted his chest and said. Fuck off. I don't need your protection. Betty said and showed her aura. Though unstable due to recent advancement, it was undoubtedly low level 5. You are strong. But I don't want to see you injured. Viner said with a sincere expression, only to earn a look of contempt. Save your tricks for those silly girls. You think I don't know your motive? You just want to climb your way up with a high-class girl like me. All poor people are the same. Betty grounded her feet and said. Viner looked at her with a serious expression and decided to reveal the secret. I know you were kidnapped by them during your childhood, but to put them all, shut up. Betty yelled with a pale face and turned towards the exit. I can't breathe the same air as you. She trembled with each step, and at the last step, her knees buckled and she fell. Arg, are you alrighty, Betty? Lila caught her by the waist and asked with a concerned face. I'm fine. Thank you. Betty's face turned red as she looked at the handsome face at a close distance. I see. I'm relieved. Lila gently removed his hands and turned towards Viner. You. If you dare this again, then I'll make sure you die a pathetic death. Viner was worried about Betty's reaction, but Lilua's words enraged him beyond reason. You can't even win me. What are you bragging about? Saying so, he looked at Betty. She was ignoring him completely and was staring at Lilu. Lilu also ignored him and stared at her. Why? Why did you change so much? Ahem. Edwina suddenly appeared in the room, startling everyone. You are the ace of second year. Don't shame us. She said with a serious face. Betty didn't care. Or you will be the laughing stock. Betty nodded. The boys followed. Edwina inadvertently glanced at the 3 women in black suits in the distance. Betty's 3 level 7 bodyguards were monitoring the training. They didn't even bother talking. 3 level 7s. And a space awakener in that. Nothing will happen. Edwina tried to reassure herself. And Edgar, I don't know his real name. He vanished. I can't find any traces of him. To disappear without any traces, is he a ghost? Her thoughts spun as she thought back to the newbie's words. Wait, he wasn't a newbie. He was a freak with 3 level success. Even more crazy was his plan. To let Betty be kidnapped to uncover the bigger secrets. Whatever. Everything will be resolved tomorrow. Kosa Brotherhood. Just like the shark tattoo on their cheeks, they ripped apart anyone and anyone in their paths. Their current path needed not killing, but kidnapping. This is the last mission. Things will go well and we'll buy the Siloe potion. Barbarossa addressed the senior members of Kosa Brotherhood. As expected of leader. If not for your vision, this would have been impossible. His confidant praised him, setting a precedent. Yes. If boss isn't here to protect us, the Viper gang won't let us live. They're too overbearing. Another loyal supporter said. His words caused the expressions of others to change drastically. A few days ago, Nut Gang was obliterated by the Soprana Gang. The enmity of these gangs was shorter than Viper and Kosa's. Yet, they didn't leave behind a single gangster alive. This was the result if their enemies got the Siloe potion and they didn't. That's why. Yes, boss. Under your guidance, we'll get the potion and destroy the Viper gang. Long live Kosa Brotherhood. Valos is ours. Boss will lead us to a golden age. One by one, they started praising him and the gang. Barbarossa's lips curled up and he raised his hand, signaling them to pause. Remember, we burned our pockets to deal with the Space Awakener. No mistakes allowed. Or I'll kill the culprit's entire family by myself. His eyes glowed with intense killing intent. Why yes. No worries. We've been preparing for weeks, there will be no mishaps. A long-haired man stepped forward and said with a confident voice. Beside him were 2 women with piercings and tattoos all over their faces. The 3 of them exuded the aura of level 7 and belonged to the top echelon of the Brotherhood. I'll leave it to you. Barbarossa was relieved. But deep inside, he felt a growing sense of unease. In one of the slums of Valos, few men and women gathered. They looked like your regular civilians and had no outstanding features about them whatsoever. However, their regulated breathing, standard posture, cautious stance, and readiness to fight indicated they were anything but normal. They didn't even sit as it might hinder their escape. These not-so-ordinary people were divided into two camps. A woman with purple hair and too ordinary face was standing on one side. Behind her were the members of the group. Clearly, she was the leader. On the other side, the members lined up uniformly, but there was no one leading them. Why late? Violet, the woman with purple hair asked. Info. A fat man from the opposite side answered and shut up. Violet didn't ask any more. She knew exactly that people in their line of profession spoke only what could be spoken and skipped the rest. 50 seconds passed since the agreed time and the members of Violet Group were getting impatient. With this discipline, do you call yourself Shadow Guardians? Discipline is everything. An old man said with rage. Disciple, ah. Evander must be proud. And you call yourself Athena Group but can't even tackle this mission by yourself. Bah. You guys are not only useless, but also shameless. Madam Athena must be disappointed in you. The fat man cursed without mercy. The expressions of the Athena agents contorted as they glared daggers at the fat man. Do you really think we need you? The old man growled. You need us, and we need you. Everyone knows this. Yet you are spouting nonsense. Quit living in denial, or even when your wife cucks you, you'll keep denying it. Fat man's mouth was like a machine gun. He showed absolutely no respect to elderly. Why you? How did you know? The old man's face paled and he nearly coughed out blood. It's true. Ha ha ha. The fat man was surprised at first, then burst out laughing. The Shadow Guardians covered their mouths and held in their laughter. They didn't want to aggravate the situation. Violet glared at the fat man, causing him to stop. It's not like I'm afraid of you or anything. Your attitude didn't piss me off, that's why. He didn't forget to emphasize that he was fearless. Fatty, one of the days, you'll die. A sonorous voice sounded, causing Fat Man to laugh again. Me dying? Pfft. Who's that bastard? I'll show you what's DA. As he turned around, the fat man's face froze. Then without hesitation, he bowed 90 degrees. Welcome, boss. They've slandered you and cursed you with words I dare not repeat. I've risked my life and defended you. Raising his head, the fat man began to cry. Rubbing the tears off his face, he pointed to the old man. That old fellow, he is using his age as an excuse to oppress the weak me. Boss, please help me get justice. Boss? The fat man raised his head and was slapped on his head. Ouch. Your acting needs improvement. Use them properly. The bald man said with a serious expression. Yes, yes. Why are you late? Violet asked offhandedly. Assisted on the Planetoid. He said indifferently. He could help out the army anonymously. He had the contacts. Sequoia flowers came up again. 1653 level SXS died. Violet's expression turned heavy. Did you find anything useful about them? Their origins? Or where they are stored at? She asked eagerly. Nope. Seth shook his head in disappointment. I've had people check up even asteroids until the Abyssal Patrol range. We have no clues. Let's talk about this mission. Violet crossed her arms and said. The Siloe potion will be sold. Violence is already on the rise due to the potion. Seth's expression changed only lightly upon hearing the potion. Siloe potion could help one advance in their level. Even high awakeners could progress at least one sub-level. As a dual awakener with 2 peak level 8s, this potion should have been very tempting to him. If it was the old him, he would have done everything in his power to get his hands on it. But after joining Shadow Guardians and learning of the miracle potion, created by a mysterious person in Shadow Guardians, He had no interest in siloey potion. Not to mention, it was made by abyssals themselves. There's no way he could trust it. Taking a deep breath, Seth addressed everyone. We're very close to finding out why they're selling such dangerous, yet precious potion. This might be a huge conspiracy. So, fellow humans, regardless of our organization, we must work together. Now, the plan is Honor Academy. Established by the top powers of the city. They acted as checks and balances to each other. After Pluto War, however, Honor Academy was on a rise. Miracle Academy was still the undisputed first, but no one knew how long it'd stay that way. While common man sent their children to academies that offered best opportunities, the powerful men sent their children to academies to create opportunities. For instance, Miracle Academy was a great place to establish a network with future army officers. Justice Academy allowed one to befriend the future bureaucrats. Honor Academy, it was the mini-society of Valos. If you thrived there, chances were, you'd also thrive in the real world. Despite the varied advantages, the question of who's the best came up every year. It was answered through a teaming duel, inter-academy competition. Cadets from first to third years participate in individual duels, and group duels to decide who's the best of the best. Like every year, this year too, people from all over Valos came to see the grand competition. No academy had a stadium large enough to accommodate the audience. Thus, the competition was always conducted in the Valos Stadium in the center of the city. It was 1 hour before the start of the tournament and the stadium was already bustling. The holograms were in full swing as every company that burnt money to buy the slot did its best to rein in customers. Though Valos had a lot of poor people, it also had rich ones. After all, its population was 30 million. Do you think Miracle Academy can still keep the title this year? How do you think we fare compared to the planetary geniuses? You are the seeded team of the Honor Academy. Are you confident in winning the first? The reporters swarmed like worms and buzzed like bees, splattering the contestants, organizers, and whoever related to the event they could find with endless questions. That also included a certain team from Miracle Academy. Betty, Lilu, and Viner in Academy's special uniform, red dress with royal gold edges, were bombarded with questions. Miss Betty, as the daughter of one of the highest army officers, are you confident in winning and upholding the army's glory? Mr. Lilu, you are heir to one of the biggest philanthropist families of Valos. Do you have any charity activities planned if you win? Mr. Viner, your master is one of the few level 8s of our city. Many question his decision to take you as his only disciple. What do you think? Betty was proud and arrogant, but neither eloquent nor social adept. She flinched at their questions and looked behind. Tass, the reporters froze all of a sudden and Betty escaped onto the main stage. What was that? They could breathe once again and questioned what just happened. Space froze. Kyuk. The reporters found Betty's bodyguards sitting in the front rows, closest to the stages. Forget it. Yeah. I don't want to die. They wanted to escape from these devilish high awakeners. Viner shook his head and walked onto the stage. Lilu on the other hand grabbed the mic and smiled at the cameras. We have decided to build a children's hospital this year. Children are our future. We must protect them. This hospital is a small contribution from my Grant family. Whoa. Write that down. Write that down. But boss, it's live. The reporters exploded, showing extreme reactions. This was definitely big news for the common public. As expected. Maintain a positive image in public. They'll never link you to the insidious things you do in the dark. Lilu flashed a bright smile and walked onto the stage. He was last of the participants from all academies. And thus, the opening ceremony began. After a long-ass speech by an n number of people common to every big event, the competition finally kicked off. The individual duels began first. The numerous stages were quickly filled as quick matches kicked off between hundreds of cadets. Fire, water, thunder, earth. Body, mind, morpher. Space, gravity. Every power was seen, and clash of each power with every other power was also seen. After 4 hours of continuous, intense duels, the results were out. First year, Honor Academy clinched the championship, defying all expectations. Miracle Academy, for the first time, lost against Honor Academy. Second year, Justice Academy won. Third year, Miracle Academy finally had won first. After an hour break of recuperation filled with countless ads, the Battle Royale began. Each academy sent 3 teams per year. Thus, 9 teams per year in total. For the Battle Royale, the stages were modified. Earlier, there was one main stage and quite a few sub-stages holding duels. Now, all the stages were combined. A glassy dome covered the stage, preventing it from any external influence. Despite how it looked, the dome could take a couple of hits from level 7 and not break. It might seem over the top, but in the past, a powerful family head saw his son was being beaten, and in anger, he attacked his son's opponents. By the time others reacted, it was too late. What happened to them? Well, they died. So, it was unanimously decided to protect the contestants by investing in a very expensive dome. The environment on the one big stage was modified and was filled with hills, lakes and small forests. The 9 teams entered the stage and the doom closed. Start. Edwina watched the match from the second-best seating. It didn't make her feel any more relieved. In fact, her heart was pounding like an engine on steroids. The second-year Battle Royale, start. The announcement reverberated across the stadium, followed by cheers. Oh fuck. Arg, Edwina cursed inside as she rubbed her sweaty palms. How the fuck would they kidnap from this stadium? There were a few level 8s attending the competition, for fuck's sake. Or maybe it was after the competition. Or maybe the kidnap was a hoax after all. The intelligence department of Shadow Guardians made a mistake, perhaps? Normally, Edwina wasn't like this. She prepared for her mission thoroughly and followed her intricate plan to the last letter. Her 9 missions were successful because of her planning. But this mission? Heh. Edgar. Edwina wanted to yell at him. If he only accepted the mission properly, with his fake mysterious background and his own strength, using her info on Betty, he would have been close to Betty now. But no. He fucking changed the mission. And the higher-ups actually approved it. Edwina didn't know what was going on anymore. Nor did she want to think about it. She only wanted this mission to end. And to never see that guy's face or hear his voice again. Yo. Hey, Arg. Edwina returned the greeting before abruptly letting out a scream and barely stopping it from biting her tongue. A few people gave them ambiguous eyes and turned back to watching the competition. What the fuck are you doing here? Edwina tapped her comm and sent the message. Varian grinned widely and turned his gaze to the stage. His eyes narrowed and he muttered. It begins. Boom. It all started when presented with the opportunity to be the ones to kidnap Betty 2 months, 13 weeks ago, they grabbed it with both hands and vowed to never let go. It's not like kidnapping was a new thing to them. They were, in fact, very experienced in the art. If there was a rating in proficiency, they'd rank first in Valos. No questions asked. That's why they got to kidnap her. Not Viper Gang. Or any other gang which were their equivalents in overall strength. But the question of how do we kidnap a girl who has 3 level 7 bodyguards, which includes a Space Awakener, slapped them in the face. They spent 2 weeks were spent in countless propositions, alpha testing, beta testing and final evaluations. 96.5% of the planning team unequivocally believed that had this been a business, they'd have already gotten 1 million KP in investment, enough to buy a luxurious villa in high-end districts. Alas, life is a bitch and kidnapping plans were bitchier. Thankfully, through countless mental trials, they eliminated every other possibility and narrowed the kidnapping opportunity down to one event. Inter-academy competition. Betty always had her bodyguards with her, so kidnapping her any other time was impossible. That's how they ended up with the original question: how do you kidnap a girl under the eyes of 100,000 people, which included a few level 8s and quite a few level 7s. Thankfully, 2 more weeks of hair pulling, drug abuse and alcohol burping gave them the solution. There were still 10 weeks and they invested a lot of money, manpower, and time on the solution. And in a few seconds, it was going to come to fruition. Honor Academy's B team is eliminated. The announcer's voice reverberated across the stadium. Above a small hill within the dome, a teenage boy and 2 girls kneeled on the hard rock, clutching their injuries. The boy's hand was roasted to black-red as blood gushed out like fountain. The girls both clutched their stomachs as the sharp cut across their stomach threatened to spill their innards. TCH, trash. The spiky-haired young man standing in front of them spat in disgust. The 2 boys behind him followed him and sneered at the injured before they turned around and followed their team leader down the hill. The dome flashed blue and a man in black waved a metallic badge and entered in. His face was expressionless like other referees. But his eyes were dead. There was no light in them. Only deep, cold darkness. The referee quickly made his way through the area and reached the injured. He fed them a light potion and carried them out. Even though the boy he was carrying resembled his own son, the referee's heart was numb. After sending them off the treatment ward, he walked up and stood below the stage, occupying his position, left corner. The huge square stage had 8 referees in total, 4 at each corners, and 4 for each sides. They were the only ones allowed to enter inside the dome. But a referee could only enter if it's in their designated area. For instance, the referee standing at the right side shouldn't go if the trouble arose on the left corner. After huge deliberations, Kosa Brotherhood finally chose to invest in a weak-willed referee and lure him to their side. But like all referees, he's a patriot and a loyal person. So, what did they do? They murdered his family and using their connections, blamed it on a rising army officer. The Grant family helped them forge the evidence and the referee had to object the reality that his wife, parents, and children were killed in a murder by the rising army officer in rage due to a potion malfunctioning. The senior military officers didn't punish the officer who they deemed as more valuable. In the end, he was off the hook with a small penalty. The referee tried, then they contacted him. The man was already broken. So, they just revealed him the truth. The potion didn't malfunction. It was the officer's fault and the army covered it up. The evidence, once again, forged by the expert Grant family, did the deed. They asked him to join them and serve their mission. They'd give him revenge. The man was already broken by that point. He couldn't think deeply. He couldn't differentiate between truth and lies. His heart was numb and his mind was blank. He accepted their offer. Revenge. The referee shifted his eyes and glanced at the stands. In one of the VIP seats, a handsome man was seated, watching the battle royal with relish. Just you wait, the referee clenched his fists. You'll be dead soon. You'll pay. Justice Academy A1 eliminated. The announcement snapped the referee out of his thoughts and he looked up. His eyes, which were calm until now, violently fluctuated. His heart throbbed and thrashed against his ribcage. This is it. This is the moment. In his zone, there was a small lake. By the side of the lake were 2 teams. The eliminated Justice A1 team consisting of the spiky guy and his 2 followers. And the ones that eliminated them, the Miracle A1 team, Betty, Lilu and Viner. The referee's eyes met with Lilu and they both understood the situation. Without any extra moment, the referee flashed his metallic badge and entered the dome. The audience shifted their gaze to ongoing fights, but still a significant part of them were paying attention to this side. Not only that, there were also high awakeners of level 7 and level 8 that were paying attention to the whole stage. The referee reached the eliminated team and bent down. A few meters away from him was Betty, and beside her were Lilu and Viner, in blood-stained clothes. Now! Stop! A thunderous roar reverberated across the stadium as a woman in black suit reached the dome in an instant and slapped the dome. Cling! The dome shook violently and cracks appeared on the sturdy structure. But ultimately, it didn't break. At the same time, a few men and women in audience pierced their own stomach and took out a few explosives. The level 8s would have left it to others, but the aura fluctuations were too much to leave the task to someone else. Stop! The level 8s locked onto them and in the blink of an eye, blocked the bombers. Saw one slot of the ring was filled. You retards! Save the miss! She yelled. Her voice caused glass to crack, and the weaker among audiences bled from their ears and noses before fainting. Control yourself, Moss. A level 8 awakener created a lightning barrier protecting the audience and yelled. Control my ass. A woman bathed in lightning shot through the stage and thrust the lightning spear into the dome. Cling. Ka. The dome started to crack and was on the verge of collapse. The second slot of the ring was filled. Why aren't you attacking? The third and final bodyguard, Hina, appeared just in front of the dome and yelled. She tried twice to teleport in, but there were restrictions. It'd take at least 2 more tries. Out of the way. A heavy voice sounded and the next moment, a figure crashed into the dome. Boom! Boom! The dome was broken apart and the stage began to violently shake as cracks spread like cobweb. The level 8 awakener's body blurred and he appeared in front of Betty in the split of a second. Saw the third slot of the ring was filled and space violently fluctuated. You! The referee was grabbing Betty. Lilu and Viner were grabbing the referee. The level 8's hand was only a few inches away from the referee when they disappeared. Arg! Screams filled with rage and killing intent reverberated throughout the stadium. The defense members on the scene were already in action and secured the audience from the effects of those screams and killing intent. Screams were fine. They would only bleed a bit and go deaf temporarily. But killing intent, it might cause a permanent trauma. Don't worry. It's all right. It's all safe now. Just be seated. We'll take care of this. The people of Valos were still accustomed to violence, so they adjusted quickly and sat in their positions. As for the ones that didn't obey, well, they were forced to be seated. On the other side, the stage had already collapsed. As they failed to find her traces on the stage, Betty's bodyguards were aghast. Roth and Moss, the lightning and body awakeners, checked their comms immediately. Betty's comm was custom-made, it could withstand a few level 7 strikes. Even if they want to remove it from her, they'd need a few seconds. Half-minute away. Roth pointed to her comm and lightning wings emerged from her back. With a flap, she shot into the air and turned into a streak of lightning. The clouds split apart as she vanished into the distance. Fuck! Moss roared in anger and raised her leg. No! No! Stop, Moss! A level 7 near yelled in anxiety. But Moss didn't care. Boom! Moss' figure blurred as she reached the clouds in an instant and kept kicking in the air, and moved forward. Simultaneously, the ground shook and cracks began to spread from the center. Damn it! The security officers cursed seeing the cracks spreading outwards rapidly. No, not just that, a large chunk of the ground just caved in and formed a crater. A little girl was sitting in her chair. Right when something happened on the stage, her mom told her to close her eyes and put noise-canceling headphones on her. But as the chair she sat on shook uncontrollably, an unknown fear gripped her heart. She was in darkness. She couldn't see anything or hear anything, yet she could feel it. Her chair started to shake. The little girl started to sob as she cried for help. MMO, huh? Before she could even call her mom, the shaking stopped. The little girl cautiously opened her eyes and looked around. Wah! Her mouth gaped open as she stared at the ground. Why was the ground cracked? Others also stared with mouths wide open. But for the opposite reason. Why did the ground cracking suddenly stop? Telekinetic. Someone in the crowd suddenly pointed out. Ah. Thank you, sir. Thanks to everyone who is protecting us. One by one, the crowd began to chant thanks. If it was in another planet, the crowd would be demanding explanation from the authorities. Heck, they'd even start protesting. But this was Valos. As the High Awakeners sighed in relief, a different scene was unfolding a few hundred miles away. Quick! Roth's lightning wings flapped as she moved towards the blinking dot on her comm, ARG. Behind her, Moss followed. As they got time to think, their anxiety calmed down. Now, they were just angry, not worried. Because they knew, before either of them, Hina was already chasing their miss. As a space awakener, she should have already caught up with them and should have even killed that damn referee. But they too wanted to take turns and torture that bloody bastard. They were naive. After all, the three of them were brought up under Colin to be dedicated workers of his family. They watched Betty grow up and doted on her more than anything. After that one incident, they left behind everything else and started guarding Betty. Protect her and practice. These were their only goals. Wouldn't the kidnappers know about Hina? Wouldn't they prepared? These thoughts never crossed their minds. And Betty was paying for their mistake. Before their brains could process the information, the referee bent down and spewed out blood. Simultaneously, Betty's eyes widened as her face paled. Her lips quivered as she shivered uncontrollably. Memories she thought she buried surfaced. Her chest felt heavy, her whole body started to sweat and she felt like someone was choking her. A panic attack. Betty. Viner held her hand with a worried expression. Thankfully, Betty was a level 5 awakener. She quickly recovered physically, but her emotions were a mess. Fuck you. Lilu slammed his fist into the referee's face. Gotcha. The referee slid across the ground as he kept coughing blood. His face turned whiter and he almost looked like a ghost. But he wasn't down. His level 6 aura was weakened, but still dangerous to them. The only plus side was that he was still coughing out blood and his aura was still weakening. The price to activate that treasure must have been high. Betty, let's go. Viner held her hand and yelled. He knew slum areas like these and could better navigate through them. At the same time, Lilu grabbed her other hand and looked into her eyes with incomparable seriousness. Betty, follow me. Beads of sweat rolled down Betty's face. She was given a choice. Lilu. She grabbed his hand and said in a trembling voice. Please don't leave me. Viner's heart twisted at her choice as he blankly stared at her. 8 years of wait, was this it? Let's go. Lilu transformed into Snake Man form and hugged Betty. Slithering across the ground, he quickly left the alley and headed towards a desolate neighborhood. Betty. Viner clenched his fists and followed them. You fuckers. Wait. The referee followed him. Boom. Boom. Viner dodged the lightning bolts as he rolled down, bent over each time. These bolts hit the apartments and instantly cursed them to pieces, including the people in them. Ash rained from the sky symbolizing the deaths of hundreds. Are you crazy? Why attack them? Viner yelled, only to get answered by a lightning bolt. He's nuts and you nutcase, stop following us. Lilu screamed from ahead. I don't trust you with her. Viner said and sped up. Betty trusts me. Lilu said and increased his speed. Why yes. Betty muttered as she continued trembled under Lilu's embrace. When she was 11, she was kidnapped. She would never forget the tight ropes on her wrists, the darkness she had to live in for hours, the smell of blood and rotten flesh amidst the darkness and the damp feeling of sitting in a messy place. The poor beggars she used to donate regularly lured her and kidnapped her. Why? Because she was rich. Do you think we poor people have time to talk about kindness and morality? We need to survive. Survive, I say. Aren't you from some rich household, little miss? Let your dad spend some money on you. She didn't completely understand what they were saying back then. But a few beliefs were entrenched in her little brain that day. 1. The beggars are poor. These beggars are bad. Poor people are bad. 2. They target me because I'm rich. They are poor. Poor target me because I'm rich. 3. They don't follow morality or kindness. They're poor. Poor people don't have any good qualities and are secretly conspiring. A ridiculous set of beliefs took place that day and only grew stronger and stronger since then. The kind and lively Betty who used to go out of her way to help the poor and needy because an arrogant and haughty girl who looked down on everyone and everything. And of course, of everyone, she hated poor people. Over the years, her definition of poor evolved into everyone below her. Being the only daughter of one of the strongest of Valos, her bar was a bit too high to reach. In no time, despite all the riches and power, she found herself alone. But now, someone was risking their life for her. Betty. Viner's scream reached her ears. Still in Lilua's embrace, she turned back in annoyance. For some reason, she couldn't get angry. Viner, he was right behind them, trying to distract the referee from attacking them. The referee was already far weaker from his peak and his attacks were no longer in the range of level 6. In fact, he looked like he could die at any moment. But instead of stopping and attacking, the boy carrying her did the opposite. Betty, hang on tight. Lilu said and his body blurred. In the blink of an eye, he crossed hundreds of meters and reached a deserted warehouse. For some reason, Betty felt an ominous feeling in her heart. Cough. Cough. The referee coughed out blood and collapsed onto the ground. His body shriveled at a visible rate. At death's doorstep, his life flashed before his eyes. Having grown up wanting to do justice for the world, he was proud of what he once was. But when he couldn't confront the injustice in the system he believed in, he joined what he previously despises. But he didn't regret it. If his death could make that person pay, then it'd be worth it. As such, even during his final moments, he raised his fingers and tried to channel his mana. When Betty tried to sense the referee through her fire sense, all she saw a bag of bones. Lilu, he's dead. Betty said as Lilu was only a few meters away from the warehouse's entrance. Lilu didn't stop. Betty suddenly shivered. The warehouse, it was giving her a very bad feeling. Betty, careful. That warehouse, Viner's shout made her instinctively realize something was wrong. She channeled her mana and was about to struggle, but Lilu was quicker and threw her into the warehouse. Kyuk. As she flew in a parabola and crashed onto the cold floor, Betty's face contorted in pain. Pain of betrayal hurt her more than the pain in her body. The space around her was completely solidified. She couldn't even move her eyelids. Lilu, I trusted him. Bastard. Viner was enraged at Lilua's action and hurled a lightning spear at him. There's no more time. Lilua's eyes narrowed and he revealed his true power. High level 5. Viner didn't even have a chance to exclaim as he was knocked out in an instant. Then without hesitation, Lilu knocked himself out. 2 seconds later, Hina teleported into the warehouse. She should have been her way earlier, but some technocrat bastard was messing with her comm. She was late by a couple of seconds. So, she was in a hurry and directly teleported to the location instead of teleporting to a nearby place and analyzing the situation. Seeing Betty unconscious but safe, Hina didn't regret the risk and sighed in relief. But it didn't last as she felt the space around her was completely blocked. Due to being a level 7 space awakener, she could still move like a normal person within the warehouse. But moving out was out of question. This blockage, they underestimated the enemy too much. Who? Following Hina's question, a round of applause followed. A long-haired man and two women with piercings and tattoos stepped into the warehouse. All the three of them were wearing a special bracelet engraved with abyss words. Hina ran to Betty and stretched her arms defending the unconscious girl. "If you dare to take another step, I'll make you regret it. Space Awakener, it's a pity." The long-haired man shook his head. "Don't waste time. TCH. The woman wearing a black jacket clicked her tongue. "Just a bit of talk is go." The long-haired man stopped abruptly. A snapping sound reverberated in the warehouse as the petite woman broke Hina's neck. "Hey, she was my target," the woman in black yelled. "Don't waste time," the petite woman said and grabbed Betty. Contrary to her looks, she was an excellent body awakener. TSK. No fun. The long-haired man clicked his tongue and grabbed at a corner of the warehouse. Out of nowhere, a palm-sized disc appeared. At the same time, the space lock dissolved and everything turned to normal. The three of them also put their bracelets back into their storage ring. "This little bitch cost us too much." Indeed. But were 3 keys even necessary? They were pretty pricey as well. "You two, chat later." The petite woman glared and said. "They'll be here in less than a minute. Let's go." "Yeah." The two nodded reluctantly. The lack of difficulty was hard to swallow. But this was for the best. Caw. Their bodies blurred and the three of them disappeared carrying Betty. Boom. Caw. 30 seconds after they left, 2 massive auras approached the warehouse. Right behind them was a level 7 awakener of Grant family. Shortly after them was an old man, Viner's master. Miss. Young master. Disciple. In the ghost ship high up from the sky, Varian rolled his eyes. Boo was already tracking Betty's comm since a week. So, despite the enemy technocrat trying to fiddle with it, they had no problem in finding her location. So, they reached her even before Hina. And Varian witnessed the murder. Even if he wanted to, he wouldn't have changed a thing. Getting too close them would have exposed Ghost Ship and sabotaged the entire plan. The Grant family man should be rewarded for his dope acting skills. Seeing Lilu, he showed a shocked expression. How shocked, you ask? As shocked when realizing their favorite heroine was actually a guy. Master, that analogy wasn't really appropriate. Boo felt like its master was becoming more carefree and also a bit stupid. Boo didn't understand why the gender issue. But it did conclude one thing. Script a chapter mid/script falling in love kills your brain. Follow the kidnappers. Varian said. I forgot. Yes. Boo facebombed and the ghost ship took off. A super AI, you forgot? Varian looked at Boo with pity. Sure enough, staying stupid makes you more stupid. The ghost ship soon reached a slum and entered an underground tunnel. There was a team of 12 awaiting the 3 kidnappers. Betty was skillfully wrapped into a box with life support and the box was quickly transported to a spaceport. Under Varian's incredulous stare, the box somehow wasn't found under the security checks and was transported to a private space shuttle responsible for delivering personalized goods for rich people. The space shuttle took off without a hitch and Ghost Ship followed it. Halt everything in the spaceport. Open everything and check. Check. Shortly after the space shuttle took off, all spaceports of Valos were locked down. A handsome middle-aged man wearing a military uniform appeared at the warehouse and clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles turned white. As his eyes literally spat fire, the warehouse was burnt to ashes, leaving behind only his melancholic voice. Betty. Finally. Varian grinned from ear to ear as the space shuttle they were tailing shook lightly. A small space pod exited the space ship and another similar pod entered it. The space shuttle continued to travel in its registered route. The space pod, however, headed towards an unknown destination. After 30 minutes of travel, it reached a spot and disappeared abruptly. Secret realm. Varian muttered. Master, I can feel it. Boo nodded and ghost ship stealth was activated to its fullest. Then with a whoosh, they entered the most secretive area of Valos. Whoa! Varian was dazzled by the grandeur of the place. With a dazzling skyline, pristine roads, and elegant designs, this place looked more like a city than Valos. Of course, it was only a secret realm. Ironically, Varian found districts belonging to each major gang of Valos. Casso Brotherhood had one. Viper Gang had one. Even Grant family had one. But they operated under the name of Obsidian. Holy shit. These gangsters are living better lives than everyone else. Varian laughed at the irony. But more than that, he laughed at their future. I'll burn everything you built to crisp. Varian's smile widened. During the last 7 days, he developed a weird feeling towards the Uranus cluster cities. Despite the hardships he faced, he never had to go through such terrible living conditions. To him who considered his life as one filled with difficulty, Valos was a living example that people had it much worse. Master. Boo's called snapped him out of his thoughts. Varian realized that Ghost Ship was entering a huge building with a symbol, C. Boo hacked into the building and Varian was able to see everything at a glance. Insane. There were rooms literally filled with aura crystals, advanced weapons, storage devices and more. From the building's AI, they were the loots of kidnapping. Betty, what are they doing? Varian found Betty in a lab. She was strapped to a white bed and 2 women were about to inject her with some strange liquid. Varian hesitated for a moment before sighing. Boo. The ghost ship entered the lab. Contrary to expectations, this floor didn't have any strong security. It was filled with level 1s and level 2s. All of them wore white suits and had a special feel around them. From the building's database, he knew who they were. Researchers. Scientists. Architects. Designers. Some kidnapped, others voluntary. Stop. The 2 women stiffened as they heard a voice in their minds. Before they could yell, a powerful mental force attacked them. Their pupils dilated and their heart halted for a moment. You've already injected her. Already injected her. Varian planted a mental suggestion in their minds. At the same time, he used his telekinetic powers and grabbed the syringe. Boo acted timely for once and emptied the barrel. Of course, it also simultaneously managed the camera in the room. Varian nodded in appreciation and sent the syringes back to their hands. Then he withdrew his powers. What happened? The woman standing in front of Betty muttered in confusion. We injected her. The other woman replied. Yes. Confirm it with security. I heard she's an important target. What do you expect? She's the only one that's injected with such a high dose. The women turned to the camera in the room and gave a thumbs up. The camera turned green, indicating that everything went as per protocol. The man in the security room clicked on a button and informed his superior. Sir, injecting complete. Moss and Roth lowered their heads and didn't respond. If kidnap of Betty hit them deeply, then death of Athena devastated them. Moss, tell me, why didn't I send Betty to Uranus despite these kidnappings? He clenched his fists and roared with red eyes. Moss' body trembled and she said in a choking voice. Why, you trusted us. Exactly. I expected you, 3 level 7s to protect my little girl. Can't you even do that job properly? Colin's chest heaved up and down as the temperature of the entire building began to rise. Flames rose from Colin's figure as he slowly turned into a being of fire. Moss and Roth felt their instincts scream at them to run away or face death. But biting their lips, they stood in their place. The desk melted under the intense fire and so did everything in the room. Moss and Roth gritted their teeth as the tongues of flames devoured them. Their skins were quickly burnt and they started to bleed all over. Arg, gah, they whimpered in pain but didn't oppose. In fact, they blamed themselves for everything. As they thought they were going to die, the fires suddenly stopped. Were we forgiven? They couldn't believe it. Colin loved his daughter too much. Oh. She's safe? Ah. Colin's emotional shriek caused them to peer through the flames. Colin held a red sphere and was talking with a stout middle-aged man's hologram. 3 million aura crystals? All right. End of evening? No, I'll send them by end of noon. Colin raised his voice. If my daughter is harmed in any way, I'll give up my job and I'll hunt you. The killing intent in his voice caused Moss and Roth to collapse onto their knees. Colin hung up the call and turned to them. With a snap of his fingers, all the fire went off. Didn't you hear? Get the aura crystals soon. Why yes. They rushed out of the room, not caring for their burnt bodies. Master, the serum is mainly a potion. There is a pill inside it, which is the real deal. The pill itself is an extremely toxic poison capable of killing level SXS in a snap. But more important, it is engraved with special runes and formations. Each pill can be marked by someone. The owner of the pill can will it and the pill will burst, releasing the poison. Boo explained, pointing to a floating blue liquid and a green pill filled with strange symbols. So, you're essentially controlling that person's life. Varian sucked in a cold breath. Yes. Boo replied. Also, the distance between the two shouldn't be too high or the pill would explode. Varian fell silent. He thought it was just Kidnap, but this definitely didn't seem like one. How do you know so much? He actually meant. Did you drink an IQ potion? The database of the building, hee hee. Boo smiled smugly. There were even a few videos. Some of the injected resisted, they were killed easily. Oh. Varian tapped his chin. Honestly, I haven't heard of this pill. Any more information? Only one thing I found important. Which is? This pill uses ilocan flower. Boo said. Very very little, but it's a key ingredient. Ilocan flower appeared. Gariki was stolen again by the shadows. Varian recalled the news he saw before his travel. Shadow Order, was the pill their idea? They've already asked for a ransom, but didn't inform Colin of the poison. Boo commented. I guess they want to reveal it at an opportune moment. Varian replied and his expression turned grave. Yes, master. Or else it'd be waste. Ilocan flower is very, very rare. Opportunistic for what? Varian muttered silently. He didn't know, but he had a feeling it was important. As Varian racked his brains, the unconscious Betty was transported from the lab to one of the space pods. A few hours later, a space pod containing mountains of aura crystals arrived. Then, Betty's space pod took off and she was sent back to Valos. The Kosa Brotherhood didn't know they didn't inject the poison and were celebrating. In the meantime, Varian had the ghost ship visit all the buildings and copy their databases. Their resources, their targets, and so on. And Varian found one particular information intriguing. Auction. There were no specifics, but he understood clearly. Black market auction. What do they sell there? The potion that improves strength and allows forceful advancements. While Colin was rejoicing on reuniting with his daughter once again, Kosa Brotherhood, along with other major powers, was preparing for a big event. Kosa Brotherhood gathered all their aura crystals and stuffed them into their space shuttles. Of course, they could use storage rings, but this was how they required to bring them. After loading, space shuttles from the major buildings left the secret realm. They traveled for an hour, going through many obscure routes, passing by asteroid structures and finally stopped at a place. After a few minutes, the space fluctuated lightly and the space shuttles vanished. This is it. Varian took a deep breath and ghost ship entered the secret realm. Shortly after, space shuttles from other secret realms of other cities reached the location and entered the secret realm. And this naturally included Athena agents and shadow guardians. Seth stared at the grand black city in silence. He, along with some Athena agents and shadow guardians, were playing as a gang. What happened to the original gang? Of course, all killed. They waited a long time for this one opportunity. Parking their spaceship, the fake gang stood on the mobile road. The road slipped forward and after a minute, they were standing in front of a gigantic building. Shadow Order Auction House. Seth pushed down the anxiety welling in his heart and flashed their ID card. After a short inspection, along with thousands of others, they were let in. The auction begins. Well, Shadow Order wanted to create a trading platform of sorts for every illegal item in the Federation. Especially for the mainly expensive ones. Why? Easy money. For every transaction in the black market, Shadow Order had a cut. But were the buyer and seller both fools? Nope. If anything, they were happy that black market existed. It's normal to kill the other party in these shady transactions to grab the items. But with the emergence of Shadow Order, such things were prohibited in the black market. Offenders were killed without questioning. While black market ate up a not-so-small part of profits, it became indispensable to shady transactions. Inevitably, every gray organization, gangs, drug dealers, traffickers started using black market. Not just them, even some families that were normal got involved in black market for few items normally unavailable. Shadow Order went a step further and also acted as an intermediary between the clients and organizations. Thus began spying, kidnappings, assassinations, suicide attacks and so on. What began as a venture for profit turned into a powerful network that turned into one of Shadow Order's pillars. Now, Shadow Order generated nearly 70% of revenue from black markets. Each planet had one dedicated black market. Except for Earth's, which was destroyed. Uranus also had one. But uniquely, even Uranus cluster cities were given a black market. Though this black market was closed frequently after Dreamer's actions citing security reasons, it was finally back on track. The grand auction welcomed the powers from the 20 sites, a rare occurrence. Pleasant greetings, ladies and gentlemen. A sonorous voice reverberated across the auction hall. A charming woman in short red dress stood on the elevated stage as she looked at the audience in the semicircular seating arrangement with a smile. At the bottom were the VIPs, and the higher the footing, the more distant the seat was from the stage, the less important the participants were. So, people of same standing were more or less seated together. As they were all men and women with blood on their hands, they had a lot of conflicts with each other. They just didn't have the chance to meet their opponents face to face. Now, they did. So, mocking greetings turned into tauntings, which degraded into insults, and soon, they were swearing at each other's face and were on the verge of breaking into conflict. As a professional, the auctioneer didn't lose her composure. This happened every single time an auction was conducted. She kept her gaze natural and mouth closed. There was a bright smile on her face, which someone mistakenly thought as her being timid and wanting to not appear awkward. Until, Yuffie is happy to be host of this grand auction. I hope you all can follow the rules. Or face the consequences. Her voice sounded directly in everyone's mind. At the end, her words were sharp and cold. Everyone felt like they were stinged by a cold needle, regardless of their levels. And the warning told them that next time, they'd feel like they were stabbed by a sword in the throat. The powerhouses in the audience frowned. Strong. Extremely strong. The moment they felt her mental power in their mind, they concluded. Peak level 8 or a low level 9. Hiss. Involuntarily, they sucked in cold breath. The strongest in the audience was only a peak level 8. But to Shadow Order, just an auctioneer was so strong. The gangsters who were usually unruly and dismissive of the order felt a sense of awe and fear. From the Kosa Brotherhood in Valos to golden drug gangs in Orion, everyone fell silent. Even Viper Gang that was itching to settle a grudge with Kosa Brotherhood held back. Yuffie's smile brightened and her voice continued to sound in everyone's heads. Good. You all know the highlight of the auction. It'll be auctioned at the end. But we've got some really interesting, high-quality products. With a snap, a white flower petal enclosed in a crystal sphere appeared above the stage. It's a crucial ingredient for one of the best control poisons, fabled Ilocan flower. Of course, not a whole petal. That's too precious. It's a 1/100th trimmed petal. Now, let's begin the bid. Yumi raised her hands signaling them to begin. 10,000 aura crystals. A small gang leader took the lead. 15,000. Her rival immediately followed. Dregs, fuck off. 25,000. A rich intel network boss sneered. 50,000 aura crystals. Shut up, y'all. The arrogant young master of a powerful gang won it in the end. The second item is a FTL communication device. As you all know, it takes a few minutes for your messages to travel between planets. For your important kidnapping missions, delays are fatal. Here, we provide latest FTL comms. They need a space stone and are very costly. But we promise, they are worth every bit. Yuffie presented a brown wristband. Upon closer inspection, a small space stone could be found embedded in it. 30,000 aura crystals. 60,000. The auction continued as the items got sold out one by one. Some items, for instance, FTL watches, were sold multiple times in the same item slot. Soon, the auction inched closer and closer. The penultimate item was a talisman, a metal engraved with strange runes. It could block off the attack of a level 7. From the foreign script engraved on the talisman, everyone recognized it to be written in Abyss. Not just the criminals, even the Abyssals sold their products here. But sometimes, the price wasn't aura crystals. As long as you assassinate the children of level 7 military officer of Orion City, and provide the proof, you are eligible. Many gangs wanted to take the mission. But the Shadow Order allowed only 3 based on their credibility rating. Then came the highlight. The legendary Siloe potion. A/N, releases of last 2 days have been halted due to filling private. It's sorted out now. The updates will be normal from the reset. Anticipation. Fear. Nervousness. These 3 emotions welled up inside everyone as they wondered her next words. How many Siloe potions would be sold? Were any last-minute changes to sell the potions on missions like the talisman or for rare materials? They didn't know. But they did know they had no control over the auction house. Yuffie paused for a minute as she let the tension build up. Despite being high awakeners, one by one, their backs were drenched in sweat. As humans they resorted to coping methods. Some gulped saliva, some took deep breaths, a few started downing alcohol and refreshments. This deal was too important. So important that their entire lives were at stake. The supreme leader of Kosa Brotherhood, the orchestrator of Betty Kidnap, Barbarossa rubbed his sweaty palms and tried to calm his ragged breath. Yet, no matter what he did, his heart didn't stop racing. This stupid. He was about to curse Yuffie inwardly but held himself back. She's a level 9 psychic. Who knew if she could hear his thoughts? As he shook his head, he caught the glimpse of Berkis, leader of the Viper gang, their archenemy. He was drinking wine like water and stared at the stage with bloodshot eyes. If he gets the Siloe potion. Barbarossa paused for a second and his body shuddered. Nuk gang and Soprana gang were also archenemies. Once the Soprana gang leader got the Siloe potion, the first thing he did after advancing was to wipe out the Nuks. Barbarossa knew he would do the same to the Viper gang. But conversely, they would also do the same, wipe out everyone related to the Kosa Brotherhood. Calm down. Calm down. Betty made us a lot of money. We can do this. We will be the one to survive. He affirmed himself and waited in dread as another minute passed in terrific silence. There will be one for each city. Yuffie's words were like an oasis in the desert, and subconsciously, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Not all cities were equal. The weaker cities were bound to lose if it was an open auction. We'll start with Orion City. The eligible ones are the 4 golden drug gangs. Yuffie announced. Of course, only those that finished missions were eligible to buy. Kosa Brotherhood's mission was to kidnap Betty and inject her with the poison. So, they too were eligible. Yuffie announced with a clap. Let the auction begin. She didn't even show the product, nor did anyone ask. They were in fact grateful to her. If she showed the product on stage, many wondered if they could hold themselves from trying to snatch it. Script chapter mid/script 1 million aura crystals. The first call was already pricier than most auction items. But it was only a tentative call. 3 million aura crystals. 5 million. One by one, the golden drug gangs raised the bid, and soon, it was through the roofs. Finally, the Golden Triangle gang paid an absurd 26.7 million aura crystals to win the potion. To put this into perspective, that amount could be used to fund the military of Orion for 2 years. Insane. Barbarossa looked at the excited man who was seated in the front row with a shocked expression. They brought the entire savings of Kosa Brotherhood, and they only made it to 16.8 million. Almost 60% higher than them. He was grateful that it wasn't an open auction, but with each potion reserved for a city. But he looked at the Viper gang and saw they were in talks with one of Orion City gangs that didn't win the bid. Fine. He gritted his teeth and contacted another loser gang. Next, Valos City. Barbarossa straightened his back and tapped the hologram in front of him. 2 million aura crystals by Kosa Brotherhood. 3 million by Viper Gang. Varian yawed as he watched the auction from outside. Ghost Ship was currently in the clouds right above the auction house. After entering the secret realm, they learned of the auction items. Even though he expected it, the existence of Siloe potion came as a shock to Varian. But since it was sold was at the end, they toured the entire place in the meanwhile. This secret realm was one of the sites of Shadow Order. It had training centers, resource warehouses, mission halls among others. But this wasn't anything special per se. The black market, the auction house, the street stalls, and special trade buildings were only present in one district, and it's a mobile district. So, this secret realm itself hid no secrets but was the key to finding the secret. Once I find out why they're selling the potions and where they are taking those massive aura crystals, I can decide my next move. Varian thought as he tapped the armrest of the throne. He used it for dreamer setting, but he thought it was really cool. Anyway, Betty wasn't injected with venom. She was safe, and kidnapping her once again was impossible. Of course, neither Betty nor her father knew the truth. Stupid woman with watermelon chest. Humph. Boo cursed Yuffie. Varian nearly choked on his saliva. Boo, who taught you those words? Boo looked at him innocently. Metanet, I got bored and played a few games. Varian felt like he was a failure of a parent. Wait, I am not even a parent. Master, isn't she brainless? If she sold potions openly, she'd have made more aura crystals. Boo raised its head proudly. Come praise me. Varian exhaled and shook his head. You underestimate those criminals. He said. The Golden Triangle, for example. They spent 26.7 million because they had only one chance. But if it's an open auction, then they could buy it at a lower price after others spend their money. Besides, the Golden Triangle can reach an agreement with the Golden Wolf Gang and put a limit on how much they'll spend, say something like 20 million. So, they'll buy the potion at 20 million instead of the original 26.7. They'll save around 7 million aura crystals if they don't compete with each other and snatch the potions from other cities. Of course, every rich gang would join this because they can save precious aura crystals. But, aren't they arch enemies? Of course, but with this method, both will benefit. Whoa. So, Shadow Order. HM. They're pretty smart. They've pushed these local gangs against each other. The gangs from poorer cities will borrow aura crystals from rich gangs that didn't win the potion in their bids. Varian said and pointed to the auction hall. The Golden Wolf lost against Golden Triangle Gang. So, they didn't spend anything and have some 20 million aura crystals. Kosa Brotherhood borrowed from the Wolf Gang just now. He showed the information on their comms captured in the surveillance. Why? Varian paused for a moment. Maybe gangs like Golden Wolf want to let Kosa Brotherhood allow a few of its members to take refugees in Valos. Sounds pretty chaotic. Well. Varian nodded and he casually glanced at the members in the auction hall. His eyes paused on one individual. The man was bald and had a big build. He was sitting next to a woman with violet hair in the back row. Apparently, they were unimportant members, but Varian had a weird feeling about the man. Do I know him? Varian rubbed his chin. As he was about to ask Boo to check on that man, Yuffie's announcement drew his attention. Kosa Brotherhood wins the bid for 20 million. Others planned an escape. But Shadow Order banned a gang from entering a non-designated city. If found, they'd be exterminated. No questions asked. Still, some wanted to try. But even if they weren't spotted entering the city, they'd have to live in incognito forever. The winners were the potion winners. They now had a much bigger share of their city. The Siloe potion could also be diluted and given to members of lower levels. So, not just the leader, but the gang as a whole would grow stronger. The biggest winners, however, were Shadow Order. They gained way more than expected. I wish you all good luck, Yuffie said in concluding remarks as the auction ended. The irony was that most of the gangs that were eligible to participate were going to be wiped out. For them, it was only bad luck. Yuffie didn't care and entered the central room of the auction hall. Coated with shiny blue alloys, adorned with exquisite paintings, the room screamed richness. The room was monitored by human, abyssal technology along with 2 level 9 powerhouses. Under their scrutiny, 3 maids meticulously sorted the payments into separate storage rings. Just in the Uranus cluster, Shadow Order had quite a few secret realms and each of those branches had departments. The auction items were the collection of all departments from all branches. Now, the revenue is sent back to the respective owners. Yuffie was no longer a little girl who served as a maid in the room. She had come a long way. But looking at the maids, she felt a sense of revulsion. Once, she too was such a lowly maid. She used her mental power on herself and forcibly suppressed her emotions. Even though she was advised against it, she did it anyway. But she was also feeling the consequences. Her emotions were getting chaotic and unnatural. Hurry up! She yelled, causing the maids to bleed from their noses and mouth. But they nodded fervently and sped up the work. After a few minutes, they were done. Yuffie tapped her alpha orb and 4 old men appeared in the room. Thanks for your cooperation. She bowed and they nodded lightly before taking their respective ring. Yuffie personally held a green ring and handed it to a green-haired old man. Sir, thank you very much. The old man didn't say much and left. Yuffie straightened her back and unleashed her mental power on the maids. Arg. Ka. Pain. The 3 maids clutched their heads and bled from their eyes, nose, ears and mouth. At the same time, the man overseeing the surveillance also bent down in pain as he bled all over and fainted. Script chapter mid/script. The surveillance video was promptly deleted by a technocrat in charge. Now, it's all right. Yuffie nodded lightly. She just erased the memories of the maids and the security guard. Reading the memories was a bit difficult since any sentient creature would try to protect its memories, but erasing them? It was much easier. She was a bit rough, so they were injured and might lose additional memories. But she didn't care. What memories do these maids have anyway? It's the same revolting things over and over. I am doing them a favor. Yuffie shook her head and tapped on a protrusion on the wall. Schwa. The floor started to shrink and the auction hall shook violently. By the time the maids woke up, they were sprawled on the ground. They hurriedly stood up and bowed to Yuffie. Their heads were still dizzy and they had no idea what just happened, but they knew that it was because of the woman. I have important things to do. Useless bumpkins, do your worthless job properly. Yuffie snorted and hopped onto a spacecraft. Let's go. There is a meeting in the Lagos district in an hour. We should not be late or that man will kill us. Yes. Two maids whispered to each other and stepped on the road. The road slid forward and the two maids cleaned themselves up. Athena, you dumb bitch. We're tired, you have to take more work. Yes, we taught you many things in the past few months, didn't we? Repay us. The third maid, Athena, stiffly nodded. I understand. Heh. That's my bitch. The two maids started chatting again. Being abused by Yuffie did tick them off, so they vented it on Athena. Athena, on the other hand, closed her eyes and used her mental power to explore her memories. If her memories were compared to a library, then a section was shredded apart, the tear crossing into other sections as well. It should be here. It should be here. Athena searched carefully and she found an inconspicuous shelf of the library. Then with a click, a black sphere appeared. Ha, she sighed inwardly. It was hard, but she managed to replicate her memory in the room and store it away safely. Usually, this trick was useless. Any telepath could do this. But any telepath, if they searched carefully, could also find the replica memory. If Yuffie was even a bit more careful and probed a little, she'd have found this replica. That'd have meant a painful death for Athena. But if she didn't, her mission would be completed. It was a risk Athena was willing to take. As a spy from Shadow Guardians, she already endured great pains to reach this point. Contrary to the Order's knowledge, she was not only a water awakener but also a mind awakener. With her talent, it was impossible to progress to level 4 and be a telepath. But Enigma, she blessed her and gave her a new life. Using a treasure Enigma gave her, Athena suppressed her mental power and got introduced as a water awakener. But even with the treasure, she had to endure an unimaginable amount of pain to suppress her mental power to prevent anyone from knowing she's a telepath. As a result, she didn't progress a bit in her water path and had to endure the pain that almost pushed her to the brink of insanity many times. She could have just died. To her, death wasn't painful. But death out of cowardice and death by abandoning the mission, by abandoning the trust, and by abandoning the blessing she was given was unacceptable. In the end, she did it. Athena glanced at the two maids in front of her and silently pierced her stomach with an ice blade and sent a message from the calm inside her body. Then, she sealed up the injury and covered it up with her clothes. I've done what I was instructed to do. I was called useless my entire life. I hope my pain and suffering can be useful to at least one person. She prayed silently. Her hard work did pay off as the Athena agents and Shadow Guardians were on wait for her message. They already exited the secret realm and were in full stealth mode. Athena Department, as the highest intelligence department, had 2 spacecrafts that were as good as custom-made sovereign ships in terms of stealth. After countless fierce discussions and table flippings, Violet convinced her superiors to lend her the stealth spacecraft. Thus, it also allowed them to deploy a few stealthy drones outside the secret realm, enabling a complete monitoring of every space shuttle that exited the secret realm. Green-haired old man. Red dress and a scar on his eyebrow. He has the aura crystals from the potions. Seth read his comm and turned to Violet. All right. She nodded and signaled to her team. The Athena agents grappled with their comms and using the cutting-edge drone technology, they peered through every spacecraft that appeared outside the secret realm. Seth watched them work in silence. This mission really needed both of them to come together. Guardian's spy and Athena's technology. Hopefully, it's not anything big. Seth prayed. That one. A short old man from the Athena group yelled and everyone took a deep breath. Their target was found. Finally. The trailing began. He learned of one more news. The Shadow Order was going to conduct a meeting with the Chaos families. There was no information on the content, but the meeting itself was enough content. On the way out, Varian inadvertently caught glimpse of the maid's secretive actions. Master, her calm can't be found with normal tests. She also has another treasure in her stomach. Varian exhaled lightly. I can't estimate it for sure, but according to the database I collected so far, such treasures have heavy costs. Hence no one uses them. She might feel the pain of fractures every moment. Humans aren't just weak and corrupt, they can also be strong and righteous. Varian said. Hum. Boo nodded. Like me. Varian pointed to himself. Come again? I'm also tough and righteous. Varian stared at Boo and added. If there's a candidate for ruling the Federation, I will totally fit. Are you trying to get into politics now? No. It was my childhood dream, alongside driving Abyssals out. You know the 3 titles, right? The Savior, who will drive the Abyssals out. The Peerless, who is the strongest human. The Emperor, who will lead the Federation to glory. But why? Varian fell silent and thought seriously. Then he raised his head. After my dad passed away, I wanted to be the Savior. I told this to my acquaintances in school. Acquaintances? Boo gave Varian a stare. Varian pretended not to see it. They laughed it off. But I was really serious. I even swore to Heaven's will. For kids, swearing on Heaven's will was a big deal. Even naughty children wouldn't lie during the swearing. Adults, well, they acted like adults and broke every oath. You were pretty serious, Master. Boo nodded in understanding. Yep. Seeing that I was serious. So, the other kids also got serious. Then said Peerless and Emperor are better than being a savior. I got angry. Even I couldn't decide if the other 2 are better. So, instead of wasting time like a kid, I did what an adult would have done. I picked them all. Varian said with a smirk. Weren't you like 10 then? Boo resisted the urge to bang its head against the wall. I matured early on. Varian smiled widely. Boo silently started Ghost Ship and exited the secret realm. Anyway, he was marked and couldn't escape. The Ghost Ship slowly trailed the target ship and thus, didn't notice another space shuttle in stealth. Script chapter mid, /script. Boo looked at Varian seated on his throne and sighed lightly. So, Master had no friends in his school. Even now, except for Kyle and Maya, he doesn't have any other friends. William can be counted as friend, but not too much. Dhruv, Mia, they are just close acquaintances. Sarah is his girlfriend. Sia. Anyway, Master is lonely. So, as a cute ghost, I shall take up the responsibility and be Master's best friend. Time passed in silence and after 2 hours, the target ship stopped. Varian raised a brow. What the fuck? Seth sprang to his feet and rushed to the hologram depicting the target ship. It approached a huge asteroid and vanished. It entered another secret realm. Or it could be something else. Violet replayed the clip of Target's disappearance and narrowed her eyes. Seth thought for a moment and shook his head. We haven't gotten access to all the secret realms, but we know their exact number. None of them are in this location. This is too far from the cluster cities. He paused and looked at the green crack in the distant space. And too close the despair abyss. Violet nodded and turned to the crew. Let's get in. What'll happen will happen. We can't give up now. Yes, Cap. The pilots nodded and the ship slowly approached the asteroid. After they passed a certain point, their view blurred and the plain-looking, gray asteroid was replaced by an asteroid filled with medical fields. Illusion formations. Seth understood. They were similar to what Varian faced in the solar trial, but much stronger and on a larger scale. The cost is very high, he thought as he stared at the space shuttle swiftly landing. The green-haired old man got out and handed the aura crystals to the 20 men and women who gathered outside the space shuttle. Each member got an average of 1 million aura crystals. They bowed to him and rushed to their respective medical fields. After separating the aura crystals into batches, they fed them to the green plants with huge mouths. Each member had to feed around 1,000 of them, and thus, each plant got around 20,000 aura crystals. The plants swallowed the aura crystals with their huge mouths. The feeders quickly rushed out of the fields, and the next moment, the asteroid shook as the plants began to visibly grow. Their aura rose rapidly. As the Guardians and Athena agents gaped incredulously, the plants went from low level 5 to high level 5 in a matter of minutes. Out of the 20,000 plants, 18,000 stopped there. But 2,000 rose higher and advanced to level 6. I am possible. Violet fell back to her seat and muttered absent-mindedly. She gazed blankly at the asteroid, and in one last attempt, she carefully swept her lightning sense just a bit. She didn't dare to be too brazen or they'd be found out. But even the aura in the distant space was telling her one thing. Accept reality. No, this is, no. Violet covered her face and yelled. In the Athena department, she was hailed for her calmness. Even under high pressure, she would take the right choices. But now, with her beautiful violet hair disheveled, lips quivering and violently shaking her head, she looked like a mad woman. In fact, she had the best composure even now. The other Athena agent straight up fainted. Only 2 old men were able to be conscious. But they too chanted like broken records. Impossible. Impossible. Shadow Guardians also faced the same situation. Seth collapsed in his seat with a heavy expression. The fat man was the only other person who didn't faint. Unlike his usual carefreeness, he had an expression of vivid horror. His mind played the destruction of Pluto, and this time again and again. But with each play, Pluto was slowly replaced by Uranus. B-Boss. The fat man crawled to Seth with a little hope in his eyes. Maybe this is all. The level 8 we saw on battlefield are not. An announcement on the asteroid cut off his words. Send the matured ones to next one. The new batch will arrive tomorrow. Our success rate is the lowest, work harder. I will inspect after finishing my rounds. That was the last nail of the coffin. Seth wanted to pull his hair, but he was bald. So, he pulled the fat man's hair. The fat man just fainted and refused to wake up. Violet closed her eyes as her face paled with every second. The old men fainted in shock. The green-haired old man boarded the shuttle and left. But Seth and Violet couldn't move an inch. Their hearts were crushed and they saw doom. Seth stood up abruptly and violently grabbed Violet's arm. We will follow them and see where they are taking level 6 Sequoias. Then we'll follow them to level 7 fields, and then we'll get to level 8 Sequoias. Seth's eyes turned red. We'll kill those level 8s before they reach the planetoids. We must. Violet looked at him blankly and laughed in despair. There are many such sites. Even if we try our best, it'd take months to find them. It's inevitable. We can't stop it. No. No. Seth roared and tightened the grip on her arm. Violet's body instinctively used lightning to protect herself, but didn't bother withdrawing her arm. Even as her arm started to bleed, Violet's expression didn't change. She looked at the bald man and smiled in melancholy. It was an honor working with you. I hope we can face this catastrophe. Uranus must not fall. Let's do our best. War is here. It's common sense that progress in divine path takes time. Even geniuses took time to go from low level 5 to high level 5. But these plants, they did it in minutes. But it didn't stop there. Are you fucking kidding? Varian wanted to flip the table. A couple of those high level 5s reached peak level 5 and advanced to level 6. I call bullshit. System, come out. Do these plants have your brothers or what? Host, the system is unique. It's not something cheap like these plants. Apologies, calling them cheap is valuing them too much. These plants would grow like weeds in higher civilizations. They won't be sold even in street stalls. You're the one to talk. My ancestor picked you up from some rubble. You aren't even sold in street stalls. The system went silent and Varian laughed out loud. Ha ha ha. Unexpectedly, the system also laughed. He. Varian almost creeped out and asked. You can laugh? Are you on drugs or what? Host, don't you want to think about the problem at hand? We can talk after you inquire what you just witnessed. This system is always with you anyway. Its voice at the end was soft. Varian cringed at the system's words. Did someone hack the system or did it have split personality? But more importantly, the system skipped his question. You sly bastard. Varian shook his head and turned to Boo. He wasn't as shocked as Seth. He had a system for fuck's sake. What are those plants? He asked calmly. Maybe Shadow Order just used a mass fertilizer that grows these plants with aura crystals. Since it's too broken, perhaps it only works once. Varian didn't think they were very dangerous. After all, only a couple reached level 6. Sequoia. A special species that recently appeared in the Uranus planetoids. They are. Boo played a few video recordings it borrowed from the Planetoid database and explained how they transform after morphing to Physegola, a higher plant species with high combat capabilities. The biggest danger of Physegola was its ability to generate smaller versions of itself. It was a one-plant army. With every passing word, Varian's face turned more and more grave. In the end, he cautiously said. Most of them are only level 5. Only a few of them are level 6. On the battlefield, only level 8 appeared. So, perhaps those were really rare. But the announcement forced him to face reality. Send the level SXS to the upper fields. The new batch will arrive tomorrow. Our success rate is the lowest, work harder. I will inspect after finishing my rounds. Script chapter mid/script, fuck. Varian slammed the throne. It clearly meant there were many more such fields. The old man only gave the 20 workers 1 million aura crystals each. So, 20 million. But what he got from selling the potions was around 400 million. That meant, he could go to at least 20 more asteroids. And upper fields, the fields that grew level 6, level 7 and finally level 8. This was devastating to say the least. So far, only a couple of level 8 sequoias appeared on the planetoids, but the damage they did was significant. Thousands of level SXS died, and even a few level 8s were killed. If hundreds of sequoias enter the planetoids, forget killing them, even defending the planetoid was out of question. Is this what they've been planning? Varian took a deep breath and calmed himself. It made sense then. They lured the gangs with the Siloe potion, amassed the aura crystals to grow these monster plants. Perhaps they were preparing for this since a long time. And for some reason, decided to forward the attack date. Varian had a feeling that it was either because of Enigma or due to rapid growth of humanity. Either way, to get the final round of cash, they planned the frenzied kidnapping. When he entered Valos, Varian knew there was a conspiracy going on. But not even in his dreams did he imagine it to be this big. If things really went bad, they'd lose planetoids. Then Abyssals could launch an open war against Uranus and cluster cities. While Varian was optimistic they could defend themselves, there was a problem they couldn't avoid. The transportation from Uranus to Neptune would be cut off. Not everyone could use teleportation formations. So, the essential supplies to Neptune would be blocked. The export of important minerals and herbs from Neptune would be cut off. Then, sooner or later, the situation in Neptune would spiral down. There was a chance, not high, but not low either, that Uranus might fall like Pluto. Fuck. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Varian cursed under his breath. He glanced at the other space shuttle whose stealth was uncovered by Boo's sensors. He concluded them to be Athena agents. If it was at other times, he'd have been curious, but now, he had no time. He wanted to confirm one thing. Boo, follow that fucker. Yes, Master. Varian wanted to verify if the announcement was a bluff. Were there really 20 asteroids with this stuff? The next 2 hours of tour told him it was a yes. The Sequoia plants in them also registered similar growth as the first one. Of course, the old man made the same announcement and set on a return journey to the secret realm. It's useless. Varian exhaled. War was inevitable. If I can fight and grow stronger quickly, no. Even if he grew stronger, to actually make a difference, he'd need to reach level 8. That'd take time. By then, the outcome of war would already be set. Maybe there's a solution. Varian clenched his fists. Before he knew it, his nails dug into his palms and blood was dripping on the ground. I don't know. Varian collapsed onto his throne and covered his face. They'd likely be ready to start war on all planets so that no reinforcements could help out Uranus. Master, even if something happens, we can escape. Boo muttered. Don't worry. Varian went silent for a while before he said in a low, gritty tone. Boo, do you know how many soldiers are fighting in the planetoids? I was helpless during Pluto War. But now, I can't bear to see them all die. I don't know what I will do. But, I am not going to run. Varian's eyes snapped open and they flashed a profound black and white. In the worst case, I'll stay here and avenge them. And these traitors that are helping Abyssals, I'll kill every last one of them. His gaze locked onto the green-haired old man. Master, what do we do now? I'll go train. Boo, try to find out other secret realms. Varian said and walked to the training room. So this is why you were laughing. At the fucking war. I really want to kill you now. Varian clenched his fists and suppressed his killing intent. Heh. Host, you are too pessimistic and underestimate yourself too much. Maybe you can do something about it. You said you aren't omnipresent. So, why do you talk like you are? Varian gritted his teeth and entered the training room. Schwa. 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 4 men and 2 women appeared. They were all criminals and thugs borrowed by Varian for training. Each of them belonged to one of his divine path and served as training courses to him. Come. Varian's aura exploded and he rushed at them in rage. Boom. Boom. I'm only a level 6. I can't change anything. Please, host. Try trusting this system a bit. What you see as a problem isn't really the problem. Just die. He felt responsible. He had to do something. Sure, he wasn't even a high awakener, but he had ghost ship, didn't he? But what could he do facing an imminent war? They returned to the secret realm in which Black Market was originally hosted. Of course, Black Market was no more. But using it as a launch pad, they tailed space shuttles coming in and out of the realm. While Varian continued his training, Boo found out 4 more secret realms. In the training room, Varian's right arm was bent in an unnatural angle while his left was charred black. Out of the 6 training bags, 4 fainted and only the lighting and body awakeners were left. By this point, Varian also allowed them to use 100% of their strength. Earlier, Varian used to restrict the strength of his opponents since they were peak level 6 and he was only mid-level 6. But things changed after last trip. The week prior Betty's kidnap, Ghost Ship was visiting the cluster cities and collecting intel. During the same period, he'd borrowed some criminals and used them to pull his lagging paths forward. So now, It was Varian who had to limit his strength to avoid killing these peak-level SXS and maintain a sense of struggle. Just like now, facing the lighting and body awakeners, he was only using two paths. Body and Planty. Varian's arms transformed into sturdy brown branches and his regeneration skyrocketed. Zap! The air seared as a lightning spear reached him in the blink of an eye. Boom! Following that attack came a fist that crushed air itself. Varian's expression remained unchanged as he sped up the circulation of prana. Right when the attacks were about to reach him, his branch arms turned back to normal. The injuries were gone. Varian kicked the floor and his figure appeared a few meters away from the lightning awakener. The peak level 6 reacted without delay and was about to bombard Varian with another lightning spear. Shwa! Except this time, a red root broke his lightning shield and pierced his stomach. Gah! The roots shrank and turned back to Varian's feet, who deftly down. Right when he did, the air howled and a foot passed where his head was. Varian swung his arm at the body awakener at lightning speed and it into a spear-shaped branch. The body awakener twisted his neck and barely avoided the attack, only to be punched in the gut. Kacha! Breaking his bones and coughing out blood, the body awakener was blown away and collapsed next to the lightning awakener. Varian stood up and stretched his neck. The chi and prana in his body were dry at this point. If I use only two paths, my limit is 6 peak level SXS. Varian narrowed his eyes. He tried pushing it, but it didn't work out. Status, body path level 6, 3250/4000, plus 10, space path level 6, 3200/4000 lightning path level 6, 3200/4000 morpher path L6, 3000/4000, plus 20, telepath path L6, 2800/4000 telekinetic path L6, 2800/4000, Varian looked at the progresses, plus 10, and, plus 20, and sighed. A couple of hours and this was the progress. His progress was already slowing down. Perhaps he was going to hit a bottleneck. During these times, instead of instinctively understanding the use of aura derivative directly through combat, he might have to study it deliberately. Varian wondered if changing the training opponents could help. Regardless, all of his paths were now in high level 6. If he used his two strongest paths, he would be able to fight off a normal peak level 6. If he used 3, he would be able to defeat geniuses. If he used 4 and 5, he could fight on equal footing with the top 10 geniuses like Sarah, Ashtar, and Xavier. Finally, if he used all 6 paths, he could rival Charles. I caught up, already. As the cold water washed away the blood, Varian muttered under the shower. It was some 2 months since he challenged Charles and also almost 2 months since he awakened. This is just getting more and more ridiculous. Forget others, even he didn't believe this. If he did participate in the solar trial now, he had a serious shot at winning by the virtue of his strength alone. No need to resort to strategies. Well, Charles is just a tick box at this point. Varian shook his head and walked into the cabin. As it could expand and contract the space inside, Ghost Ship didn't really have regular rooms. There were some storage treasures that Boo had which held things like walls, spare metal and of course, weapons from previous master. Of course, the star treasures all rotted from celestial level and were in the mortal rank. With some of the materials, Boo made a training room for him. Under his suggestion, it also made a cabin. Why? To look more like a space shuttle and not a field. As Varian stepped into the cabin, Boo waved its hand. Master, master, laying on the couch, and glancing through the tempered crystal glass, Varian yawned. Yep. I tailed their space shuttle and found another secret realm. Boo reported excitedly. Good. Varian nodded. This is the 5th one, right? Any useful information? Varian sat back up and asked with a heavy expression. War intel was crucial. His strength couldn't help them much, but if his intel was game-changing, the weight he was feeling, the mountain of responsibility would lighten, if only a bit. Boo clenched its small fists and shook its head. Varian collapsed on the couch and his eyes dimmed. He paused and chuckled wryly. I don't know if I should be happy knowing what's going to happen. Let's keep searching. Maybe we can do something. Speaking of which, Varian patted his forehead. Did they transport the level 6 Sequoias? The level SXS were supposed to be transported to level 7. Even though there were bound to be a lot of them, Varian decided to find as many as he could. Then inform the Shadow Guardians and let a level 8 or level 9 launch an attack on them. Sure, these Sequoias are a menace and would destroy the balance of the battlefield. But that's only if they make it to the battlefield. Find as many as we can and destroy them all. Was his strategy. No. They were all harvested and stored in special warehouse. But they are yet to take off. There was an announcement an hour ago, they'll be transported soon. You are monitoring them? Varian raised a brow. Master, do you remember the Athena agent ship? Yep. They had some nice drones. I borrowed a few. You stole? No. Didn't you say that if we take it without asking for the good of mankind, it's calling borrowing? Right. Varian nodded. Keep monitoring them. If we can make a dent in the war, that's only way. Yup. And I don't know if this is important, but in one of the buildings of this secret realm, I found a famous scientist, Kamla. Boo replied after a moment of hesitation. Scientist? Varian frowned. The last secret realm had famous engineers, right? Yeah. The ones before were members of famous architects. The ones before were various technicians. Yep. I see. Varian shook his head and was about to rest, but he suddenly asked. Show me the information of Kamla. A hologram popped up and the information of a skinny woman with gray hair was displayed. Kamla. Age, 48. Field of study, anti-stealth technologies. Major work, one of the junior designers of Valos City's X facility. A major participant in the defense systems of Valos City. Official status, dead. W8, what? Varian sprang to his feet. Valos X facility. That was the place for teleportation formations. She was only a junior designer, so there wasn't much to fear. But, defense systems. Varian's face darkened. Planetoids were certainly under attack. But he never thought cluster cities were also prone to immediate danger. Directly attacking cluster cities was simply too hard. The defense systems of these cluster cities were probably the best in the Federation. Even if Shadow Order and Chaos families, the biggest powers under Order in Uranus cluster, used their full strength, they wouldn't be able to take out all the cities. The best they can do is win over 5 or 6 cities out of 20. But by then, they'd have sacrificed too many of their forces, they'll lose by default. No matter how he looked at it, it wasn't a viable option. But Varian couldn't get the thought out of his head. Boo, show the info of the engineers, architects, technicians of the previous secret realms. Yes, Master. Varian took a deep breath and stared ahead. There were thousands of holograms. Show only ones who participated in a big project and have a decade of experience. The holograms dwindled down to 100. Varian's mental sense covered the holograms and he took in all the information with closed eyes. His brain ran at crazy speed as he processed the bits. After a minute, his eyes snapped open and Varian's face was filled with shock. Valos, Orion, Umbriel, Rosalia cities, these guys have all worked in one of the cities. Varian's voice grew grave with each word. Shadow Order accepting, kidnapping people in its area is normal, no? This branch kidnapped these people because they live here. Boo raised its head in confusion. I don't think so. Varian shook his head. He felt like, no, he was almost certain. Even though none of these people seemed to devise a war plan, according to Boo's database, they were constantly processing the information relating to the cities and storing them. Due to the lack of comm usage, Boo didn't know for sure if they were sharing the information and devising tactics. But these people are the best advisors to devise a plan on the cities. In official records, they're all dead. If I were the enemy general, I'd surely use them for that purpose. Wow, Shadow Order is really preparing since a long time. It was as if they all underestimated the Shadow Order. But Master, even if they want to attack cluster cities, what can we do? Boo asked a lethal question. Varian found himself speechless. Yes, even if he assumed Dreamer identity and presented this information to military, no one would change their stance. In their opinion, cluster cities were impossible to be conquered. Varian was also of the same opinion. But if Shadow Order wasn't serious, why would they bother gathering so many people with expertise in the cluster city's design? In this time of crisis, if anyone proposed to focus on cluster cities instead of planetoids, they might even be suspected of treason. I'll inform Enigma. Varian said dejectedly. Enigma, the Order has gathered experts who know secretive details about the defense, design and materials of the cluster cities. There are too many of them for it to be a coincidence. I'm confident they're going to attack the cluster cities. It seems ridiculous, but I can't convince myself otherwise. I'm sending you the videos. You can check their authenticity and come to a decision. I don't have a good feeling about this, Master. Boo clutched its head. Stop, Jinsei. Varian was cut off by his comms prompt. I forbid you. I can escape due to, Varian replied swiftly. Only when you are in that spaceship. If you're fighting in the open, you have no protection. Varian fell silent. In fact, he had one teleportation formation Boo created long ago. That teleportation formation was the reason he went to Evander and revealed his level. It was also the one life protection he had. If he was ever in a danger during a fight, Boo could use it and teleport him out. But that would work only once. Should he risk such a precious life-saving amulet for a risky war whose outcome was uncertain? Don't try to talk me out of it, Enigma. I'm staying. Is your comm an FTL? FTL? Varian looked to Boo. He did remember seeing one such item in the auction. Faster than light. Even light takes more than 2 hours to each between Earth and Uranus. It delays communication. So, we use space stones to shorten the time. Your comm is FTL. I upgraded it long ago. Boo explained. Yes. Varian answered Enigma, and the next moment, her hologram appeared in front of him. Enigma's black clothes formed a contrast to her tricolor hair that flowed down to her waist. Despite being a hologram, she had a cold and dignified bearing. The mask covering her face only showed her eyes, and those eyes stared at Varian in visible anger. Hi. Varian waved his hand. Enigma just stared at him coldly. Hi. Varian waved again. Boo, is this thing not working? Varian turned to Boo. Master, you're dead. Boo almost coughed out blood, despite having none. It's working perfectly well. Enigma said. Not a certain someone's brain. Varian coughed lightly. Don't worry. I won't die. I'm not the one worrying. Enigma replied curtly. I mean, tell Sia not to worry. I won't go the front lines. Varian said with a serious expression. So you'll fight somewhere, huh? Enigma's expression grew frostier. Stop finding loopholes in my words. Who are you? An interrogator? I will only fight level SXS, this isn't a game. There are no special places for levels. Anything can happen at any moment. You could be facing level 3s now, and the next moment, a level 8 might appear next to you. I fought on Planetoid, you know. Your fights on Planetoid are only a small conflict. It isn't an all-out war. It's fundamentally on a different scale. Are you reading my mind or what? I know you, Varian. Huh. I don't want to see Sia down. Enigma's voice lowered. This war will pass. Uranus will be safe. The cities will be fine. You can grow up in safer environment and reunite with Sia. Just go back to Earth. Varian smiled wryly. I'm sorry, I don't want to run away. I can't do it. I'll try not to fight, I'll try. Enigma's eyes chilled and she glared at Varian. I'll collect the intel until the war starts. He said slowly. Why you? Incorrigible. Enigma's voice quivered, causing Boo to jump in fright. This woman was capable of such complex emotions? You know what? Just shut up Sia. You spoiled him too much. Me? When did I ever worry? Enigma's voice was raised and the hologram went off. Sia, since you worry about me such, why are you hiding from me? Master. Yeah. What do we do? What we've been doing so far. Find secret realm, monitor Sequoia, and train. You're really stubborn. Of course I am. Varian raised his chin proudly. Sia sighed lightly and walked out of her residence. She knew trying to convince him was already futile. To put it nicely, Varian was determined. To put it badly, Varian was stubborn. Enigma also knew it, but she tried anyway. Enigma is pissed off. Sia shook her head. Thankfully, he wasn't talking to her in person. Or she'd have beaten him up already. Of course, not on her watch. Varian was her bottom line. And she too was his bottom line. During their childhood, he almost got himself and her killed once. Only after realizing his actions put her in danger did he stop those crazy risks. But now, he was still willing to risk his life. Sia understood that his spaceship could protect him, but she also knew that it was futile if he participated in a battle by himself. If the war is about to start, then I'll convince him. Sia bit her lip until it bled. She was scared of seeing him. Scared of the day he would regain his memories. Scared of the day he would once again ask her to leave him alone. But scared as she was, she couldn't stop him from regaining his memories. He'd learn the truth sooner or later and the decision was up to him. And even if Varian forgave her, Sia knew she couldn't forgive herself. Everything happened when she was conscious. Maybe she had the power to stop Amanda's death. Perhaps she'd never know. Are you sure it's not your hallucination, again? Evander tapped the couch and worriedly asked. I won't deny I had hallucinations, but he is alive. Sarah smiled. Evander's face slowly lit up and he threw his head back and started laughing. Ha ha ha, I knew it. That sly fellow, ha ha ha, he is alive. He is alive, thank the heavens, he is alive. Thank the heavens. Evander's eyes reddened as he murmured in a choked voice. Yeah, thank the heavens. Sarah nodded. Cough cough. Evander realized he was in front of his daughter and quickly used his powers to make his face normal. I wasn't worried about him or anything. He can die any day. I'm just worried about the funeral costs. Evander said with a straight face. Father, don't be at Sundra. Sarah, I'm not. Evander almost jumped. That's what Atsundra would say. Sarah laughed. He taught you that, right? Evander leaned forward and asked with a serious face. Yes. Bam. Evander slammed the couch and stretched his arms. Let him return. I'll break his bones. He didn't even inform that he is alive. Am I still his master? Well, the Xanders. The air turned still and Evander turned to her. Forget everything, Sarah. At least wait until he's strong enough. Sarah nodded and said. I can feel the bottleneck of level 7. That's my daughter. Evander grinned and patted her. Sarah smiled, but soon frowned. What happened? Did I pat you too hard? Evander was confused. I miss his pats. Sarah muttered. Evander's heart dropped and he swallowed. With wide eyes, he pointed at his baby daughter. Don't tell me you too. I don't know when it happened. Sarah blushed and lowered her head. Arg. Give my back my pure daughter. Evander tragic wails that could break hearts resounded throughout the room. Thankfully, Sarah asked him to meet in an unsecured room. Or the entire residence would have heard their mighty high general's wails. After an unknown period of time, Evander sighed in dejection and got up to leave. Oh, where is that fellow now? Uranus cluster cities. Sarah said. Seeing Evander's face paling, she titled her head. I was in seclusion, did anything happen there? Evander felt like beating his disciple. Why can't this bastard just stay in peace? Father? What's happening? He looked at Sarah and said in a gloomy voice. War is looming. Everyone, including the Alliance, were understandably perplexed and cautious. But as humanity explored the unknown, their fear was replaced with ambition. In a matter of decades, humanity found the special treasures in ruins that helped in terraforming a planet. Thus began the colonization, and it was all over in one single generation. That generation enjoyed abundant resources like no other. People had more kids to help them manage the new properties and encouraged their kids to have more kids. A population explosion unseen in the history of mankind unfolded, and using the dungeons as a springboard, humanity's power skyrocketed. Since then, the Human Alliance called itself as the Federation. Culturally, economically, militarily, it was on a different scale compared to Human Alliance. It was like leveling up. Unfortunately, their difficulty also seemed to have leveled up. Abyssals. Since their arrival in 400 YAB, the Federation fought the Abyssals countless times. Countless times the wars big and small maybe, an all-out war was fought only once, and that was the first war which humanity bitterly survived. There were times when tensions escalated, and a few times, all the planets and Abyssals fought simultaneously, similar to the First War. But none came close to the tension and fear. Until now. Human armed forces announced a red alert and increased their deployments. The reserve personnel were undergoing a short training to be deployable should the need arise. It all started with a few days ago. The Abyssals stopped skirmishes across all the planetoids. No ambushes on the space patrols. No short or long wars. Everything was peaceful, or so it seemed. Abyssals started deploying more and more weapons. Their formation changed to offensive, and they started bringing in warriors that were usually kept in reserve. Unwilling to be outmatched, the military matched their deployments. They went toe-to-toe with Abyssals in manpower, logistics, and infrastructure. Then they waited. The Abyssals didn't start the conflict as expected. They all did one thing. Right from Mercury to Neptune, they started calling in more and more forces before they finally stopped. Or rather, had to stop. Both sides deployed their full forces. Teen children bade farewell to their old parents, middle-aged parents bade farewell to their little children, old people bade farewell to their families. Finally, even Abyssal ships no longer patrolled the space. They were all on the planetoids. As a result, humans were also forced to bring their space shuttles to neutralize Abyssal's advantage. It was as if a string was stretched to its limit, and with just a bit more push, it'd snap. But that one final push never came. Be it Mercury or Neptune, every single army member, be it a level 2 soldier or a level 9 high general, all had serious faces. Every soldier could feel the tension in the air as they patrolled the border. Just a few miles from them were Abyssals, prepared, aggressive and strong. They didn't attack. But that only made their inevitable attack more serious. Like all other reinforcements, Richard and Eve Xander were deployed on a planetoid. Forget the soldiers, even they had no idea when the inevitable was going to happen. Tension was like fuel. It grew every day. Bit by bit. All it took was a single spark for everything to go boom. Unfortunately, that one spark never occurred. It only made the situation worse. The longer the tension remained, the greater the subsequent damage. As powerhouses that were part of reinforcements, Richard and Eve Xander were deployed on a planetoid. For better or worse, it was still with Anna. The old men would have protested at any other time, but with how matters stood, they would beat up anyone who protested now. They were one of the few people that knew the real reason for this crazy situation. They're really serious, huh? Richard muttered from the top of a tall red tower. His mental sense was locked onto his comm to act immediately after notice. He also kept an eye on the borders. Since they're trying to take down the planetoids, they have to be serious. Eve's gloomy voice sounded from the comm after Athena group submitted their findings along with evidence. The military was flabbergasted. There was also the evidence irrefutable aura measure. Of course, there was an accident that the space shuttle lost a few of their drones. This gave them hope. Maybe something went wrong? So, they sent a few more exploration teams. Nope. Every observation gave the same dreary result. Sequoias were real. After verifying the threat, the Army decided to send reinforcements to Uranus planetoids. It also planned the dispatch of special forces that would hunt down the Sequoias. But all came to naught when Abyssals suddenly turned aggressive and started their crazy deployments. Most of the reinforcements were called back and Uranus only received a fraction of the intended help. Abyssals weren't trying to start a war. Not an all-out war at least. Their deployments were there just to hold down human forces from supporting Uranus. I'm still doubtful. We didn't find any areas holding level 6 or level 7 Sequoias, much less level 8-inch. Richard tried to argue. Eve pierced his shallow argument. Sovereign Irene found them in the asteroids near the abyss. Level 6, level 7 and even level 8. She said she sensed some stronger fields deep in the asteroid belt, but didn't enter. The threat of Sequoias is real. Ha! Richard sighed deeply. If we were only stronger. Eve didn't reply as he put down the comm and gazed into the distance. If I was stronger. He reached a lofty height in his life. His back was the assurance to tens of thousands of souls standing behind him. But even then, he wished he was stronger. In this epic conflict, even a level 9 was helpless, much less him. Hope in my soul lasts forever. Any individual that posted information that could bring about chaos would be arrested and detained. All the essential items were delivered by the drones to each doorstep. Billy looked at the rations in his hand and blinked in confusion. Closing the door, he stared at the deserted restaurant. Compared to a week ago, it looked like a haunted house. Boss, did you commit a crime? Why are we locked? I committed a crime of taking you in. The chubby boss walked out from the kitchen and took the rations from Billy. After checking the contents, he shook his head. Millie wants to eat purple fish, and they keep sending these eggs. Billy rolled his eyes. Isn't Millie in her dorm? We can't even go out, how are you going to send her the food? You little bastard, can't I at least dream of feeding my own daughter? The boss smacked Billy's forehead. Ouch. Billy rubbed his forehead and glared at the boss. You've been dreaming since a week. How long will you dream? The chubby boss' eyes dimmed and he turned around. With a deep sigh, he walked into the kitchen. Billy panicked. Boss, I'm sorry. The boss paused and shook his head. It's not you, Billy. I really don't know how long this will last. Billy, if you are weak like me, you can never control your life. Be strong. Very strong. Grasp your own life with your hands. If you are strong, everyone will respect you. No one will keep you locked. Billy's eyes lit up and he nodded vigorously. Boss, I'm going to practice. Don't worry, after I grow stronger, I'll beat up that Peter for you. I'm a loyal fellow. Ha ha ha, the chubby boss laughter reverberated in the street. Attention Mr. OSS, you have breached the enforced conduct. You are fined this time. Next time, you'll be detained. A mechanical voice caused both of them to jump in fright. After understanding the message, the boss jumped again. Fuck. Fine. You think my grandpa left me a magic bracelet or something? OSS cussed. What did I breach anyway? Your laughter was too loud. Billy blinked his eyes innocently as he saw Boss glow red with anger. He slipped away from OSS sight and sneaked into the training room without any noises. He was the reason Boss laughed. Billy? OSS shouted, but in a low voice, which made it almost seem like a whimper. He didn't want another fine. From the training room, Billy glanced out of the glass window and saw the empty streets with curious eyes. He didn't understand war. But he did understand that there was something wrong. I wonder how long will this last. I really want to go to Miracle Middle School and become a big gangster. S-32, S-58 and S-14, S-17 is sent off duty. You need to cover their shift. An officer informed the 3 patrol teams. An uncomfortable silence set in as the 3 teams stared at each other with tired faces. Patrolling civil area was demanding as drones always kept an eye on them. If they slacked off the slightest, they'd be punished. Besides, it's not like patrolling was safe either. There were many gangsters, criminals and hooligans in the city. This was a crucial period, and their activities were curbed. But gang activity didn't completely vanish. For instance, they could use space awakeners to travel to and fro. They could use alpha orbs to communicate and plan. This all happened in the dark. In fact, there were also quite a few infringements done in the open. When patrol guards tried to catch them, some retaliated. The lucky ones escaped with minor injuries. The unlucky, they were killed. The more areas they covered, the higher the danger. So, it was natural these patrol teams were reluctant. I am not informing you, I am ordering you. The officer bellowed. You know the penalty for disobedience, right? Especially during this period. The officer's words caused the 9 members to go pale. They knew a bit about the upcoming war. If they resisted an order now, they could very well be charged for treason. It was in fact a common tactic used to instill fear and discipline. For the punishment to carry maximum deterrence, they would directly be killed. Once the thought crossed their mind, a shiver ran down their spine and their backs were instantly drenched. We have no other choice. They looked at each other and sighed inwardly. Controlling their breath, they answered sonorously. Yes, sir. We'll complete the task. Don't disappoint M. The officer halted midway and saluted the handsome middle-aged man in the military hover car. The patrol teams followed him to salute. Looking at the familiar car, they all had only question in mind. Shouldn't he be in the military zone? Colin should be in the military zone. After all, this was a crucial time. But the message he received was even more crucial to him. After storming into his home and checking on the sleeping Belly's condition, he sighed lightly. She looked fine. Not like a poisoned person. But the poison was supposed to undetectable. Should I inform this to others? But her health checkup showed no abnormalities. Colin weighed his options but didn't dare to risk his daughter's life. So, he locked himself inside his room and opened an alpha orb. It projected the hologram of the person who sent him the message. On the other side was an abyssal sitting on an exquisite tone. Colin could tell the other party was weaker than him, but instead of giving him a sense of security, it only increased his fears. Hi Colin. I'm Abrax. The Abyss Prince introduced himself with a smile. The boy was returned the next day and except for a few people, most didn't even know this happened. However, he died strangely the next week. The investigation was still going on. Snap. Abrax simply snapped and the hologram changed. It showed the boy undergoing writhing agony before dark and white circles appeared all over his body before he melded into a puddle of blood and flesh. Abrax smirked. This brat's father didn't believe in our words. So, We had to prove our authenticity. I could have shown the poison on your daughter, but that'd be cruel for her, don't you think? Colin stiffened up and nodded like a puppet. Why yes. Abrax nodded and snapped his fingers again. The holograms displayed the videos of some boys and girls that were kidnapped in the past. They returned after the payment, but they all died shortly after. Colin saw each and every one of them die in the same way. His heart stirred and he closed his eyes. Stop. I get it. Abrax's lips curled up and he said. I can keep your daughter safe and even dispel the poison. In turn, I need you to do something for me. Colin's face was conflicted as he found himself torn apart between duty and love. I don't like indecisive people. Abrax shook his head and was about to snap again. Wait. I'll do it. I'll do it. Colin closed his eyes and yelled. Abrax's smile brightened. 17 out of 20. I guess it's fine. Alright, the plan is. With each word, Colin's eyes grew wider and wider until his knees wobbled and he collapsed on the floor. This was too much. He couldn't do it. Colin raised his head and his eyes met the sharp gaze of Abrax. You're unwilling? Don't worry, I'm not forcing you. The Abyss Prince said with an elegant smile. It quickly turned into a cold sneer. Just your daughter, she will go through unbearable pain before she dies. May I add that the best option you have if you obey me is to kill her yourself? No. No. Colin clutched his ears and trembled violently. Abrax softened his voice. I can guarantee your family's safety. Colin raised his head and looked at Abrax with bloodshot eyes. You know it clearly, don't you? The planetoids are bound to fall. Reinforcements aren't coming. Our Sequoias will destroy every human on the battlefield. Gotcha. Colin clenched his fists. Every word Abrax spoke was the truth. As one of the highest military officers of Valos, he knew the ground reality. The planetoids would fall. Then all that was left would be the cluster cities. Uranus was also in danger. You aren't betraying, you just want a better future for your daughter. Abrax said slowly. She has the protection of level 7s. Colin said weakly. Even he wasn't convinced by his own words. Abrax discovered his lack of confidence and attacked it. Those bunch of trashes can't even save your daughter from being kidnapped. You don't know who kidnapped her, do you? A bunch of level 7s. They can't protect her. You will be required to fight, you won't be able to protect her. You're right. Colin hung his head and his conflict finally died down. Yeah. I don't want to risk her life. Once the planetoids fall, her safety isn't guaranteed. Even if it is, they can kill her through poison. This is the best opportunity. Prince Abrax, I'll do what you say. Colin swore. The soldiers in the military zone didn't know their commander betrayed them. They were still adjusting to the new reality of imminent war. A few days ago, reinforcements arrived from various planets. But most of them returned. So, the planetoids had no choice but to ask the Uranus and cluster cities for help. Thus, Valos City had only 40% of its warriors in the military zone. In 2 days, 10% more would join the planetoids. Despite being only 30% of the original count, the soldiers weren't worried. Cluster cities were known for their defenses. Before the planetoids were taken down, cluster cities weren't in any danger. That was the consensus among every expert. Except one. Planetoid RX-23, hold. Hold. Down. Under scorching heat, 5 body awakeners covered a heavy black metal slab with chi and dropped it between similar metal slabs. Boom. The ground trembled violently. Then without any external intervention, the metal slab sunk a few meters in due to its sheer weight. Good job, guys. The voice in their minds congratulated them, causing the 5 soldiers to heave a sigh of relief. They looked around and saw many teams similar to them. After hours of toil, the teams finally placed the black slabs side by side to form a huge wall of height 10 meters and length 5 miles. As for why they didn't use drones, well, these metal slabs were of a special kind. They were incredibly heavy and needed some sort of aura derivative to be injected to be lighter. Even then, their weight was very high. But the reason they still used these slabs was initiating. Step back. A mechanical voice sounded and the teams moved back. Schwa with a whistling sound, the black metal slabs began to glow. Then the individual black slabs began to merge and in a matter of minutes, formed a huge black wall. Right then, hundreds of drones arrived and arranged lethal weapons on top of the wall. Testing in a minute. Retreat. A soft voice sounded in their minds and every soldier sprinted a few miles away in a minute. Boom! Boom! Air exploded violently and a man appeared in front of the wall. The aura he gave off was that of a peak level 6 controller. Without any delay, he heightened his strength and punched the wall. Boom! Boom! The wall shook violently but not a single crack appeared on its surface. The man didn't stop and kept punching the wall. Boom! 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 After 5 minutes, he stopped and gave a thumbs up to the drones in the sky. HAAA, as the soldiers sighed in relief, the voice in their mind continued. Next project. Sovereign Vian sighed lightly. If our deployments are weaker, then we risk losing our planetoids to abyssals. We sent the best help we can. Neptune is already taking off most of our reinforcements. We can't do the same for Uranus. Don't play dumb. They're just trying to hold the army down. They won't start an all-out war. Irene gnashed her teeth. Maybe. Sovereign Vian muttered softly and raised her voice. But what if they do? Will you be responsible? Irene Nile clenched her fist. Don't you understand? If Uranus planetoids fall, then cluster cities are next. If cluster cities are gone, then Neptune will be cut. Hold it there. Sovereign Creo said, rubbing his beard. While the chances of planetoids losing out are high, they won't be able to win the cluster cities. For one, the cluster cities are incredibly defensive and two. Creo's voice turned lower. The losses they face to conquer the planetoids will render them useless for any significant war. Perhaps they'll be useless for a decade. During that time, we can surely get YU. Sovereign Irene glared at Creo. Even if you send me reinforcements, you will lose a few planetoids at most. Can't you see the situation? Uranus will lose all planetoids. What if we send you reinforcements and they use Sequoias on our planets instead? You do realize we aren't the only ones with teleportation capability, right? Sovereign Julius asked lightly. His words caused everyone to freeze. Indeed, abyssals could also teleport from one abyss to another. So, what if their target wasn't Uranus at all? What if it was Earth or Mercury? If they send the reinforcements and weaken their defense, then they'd be utterly helpless against the Sequoias. I agree with Sovereign Creo's words. Sovereign Vian nodded. We still don't know for sure if the abyssals will win. But even if they do, their army would be so damaged that it's practically useless for any other mission. She paused for a while and continued. And I have a suggestion. If things really go south, we can always blow up the planetoids. Are you out of your mind? How many lives will be lost that way? Irene was practically yelling at this point. No. Rather than letting them use the planetoids, it's better to destroy them all. Besides, if they win, the planetoid soldiers are destined to die anyway. This way, their death will have meaning. Meaning? Irene understood the rationale behind her thinking, but she couldn't help but get angry. Yes. We can't be too emotional. Our decisions must be towards safeguarding the human race. Sacrificing some for many is justified since ancient times. Sovereign Julius nodded. The meeting fell silent once again. Finally, Sovereign Albert looked at everyone and sighed. Please understand one thing. We cannot rule out a full-scale war by abyssals. They might do it. The sovereign's pupils froze and their breath halted for a moment. Realizing that the Uranus war could possibly lead into a full-scale war, they couldn't help but frown in anxiety. If it's really a full-scale war, then there was a chance that their planet might fall. Sure, their defenses were far higher than the first war. But who could say for certain that abyssals weren't hiding any trump cards? Sequoias were something no one expected. What if they came up with something else and dealt a fatal blow? No one saw Pluto war coming. Sovereign Julius rubbed his forehead. I honestly can't guess their actions. It's best to be as defensive as possible. Irene saw her request was going nowhere and slumped into her seat. Ares looked at her and lowered his head. He thought of the Neptune status quo for a few minutes and raised his head. I'll send a few army groups. But, in case the planetoids fall, let them retreat. His words caused an utter silence in the room as everyone stared at Ares in astonishment. Thank you. Irene looked at him with a complicated gaze and muttered softly. A few years ago, Ares was still a new sovereign and now, he was helping her out. Ares, did you really think this through? Creo frowned. Neptune is too important. We don't want another Plut, Ares cut him off. I understand everyone's risks. By sending and not sending, we're risking either way. The ball is not in our court. Logically, if Uranus has a problem, Neptune would be the most affected. And, morally, it's because of her actions that Neptune hadn't fallen. Neptune owes her and people of Uranus this much. His words caused everyone's expressions to change. Indeed, the only reason Neptune didn't fall was her support back then. The reason Uranus' army had weakened was also because of their previous sacrifices. And like Ares said, they were risking either way. What if abyssals didn't send Sequoias to them? What if they didn't start a full-scale war? The loss of Uranus planetoids would also mean they'd face endless attacks from the Uranus abyss. The overall situation would worsen. In the end, the sovereigns looked at each other and finally relented. Fine. I guess I'll send a few level 8s. But not too many. Me too. Have them kill the level 8 Sequoias. I can't send from army. I'll send my family servants. They're peak level 7s, but sorry. I'll send Richard and his colleagues. Though we'll be in a pinch, I'll try to manage. Yeah. But ensure their safety. I honestly think we're gonna lose. I don't want them to die. If they do, it's on you. Irene Nile sighed deeply. Thank you, everyone. Looking at their faces filled with reluctance, Irene thought back to the asteroid location. That was the only location with level 8 Sequoias found so far. And given that we're only few level 8 Sequoias so far, the location must be one of the few. If I enter it and destroy the Sequoias there, then maybe I can save the planetoids. Uranus planetoids were in a rather precarious position, but due to the reinforcements given by sovereigns, they were confident in reaching a stalemate. But even they acknowledged that should the Sequoia arrive in estimated quantities, they'd suffer significantly higher losses than abyssals. Soldiers were barred from relaying the ground reality to their loved ones. The general public was kept under the impression that this was a normal deployment matchup. The talks were already underway and soon, both sides would withdraw their forces and things would return to normal. The propaganda mission overworked itself as every billboard, every news channel and every show was aimed at pacifying the public. You're safe. This isn't a war. We are no longer weak. If they dare to attack, we'll destroy their armies and take the planetoids. The public were largely calm after this narrative was accepted. Of course, there were problems. Initially, hysteria gripped humans from Mercury to Neptune. Taking advantage of the rising fears, Shadow Order recruited many under the pretext of joining abyssals to survive. While they did get some support, it was very, very minor. It was unexpected for the Shadow Order. They always assumed their fellow humans to be like them, opportunistic, bending to the strong and bullying the weak, abandoning their identities for survival even if means stooping to the lowest of low. After all, that was how they were and how everyone else was supposed to be. But humans were different. We can die, but we will not betray. My grandfather died serving the army. How can I seek refuge in them? We trust our army. Born as a human, I'll die a human. This incident left the leaders of Shadow Order dumbfounded. As someone who believed in the vial of humanity, the tenacity of common people in the face of catastrophe left them speechless. Sure, they didn't know the whole truth about the situation. But the fact of the matter was that humans, despite fearing death, were willing to risk it all for the sake of their race. Master, you've been smiling since an hour. You're making me worried. Boo's quivering voice sounded in the ghost ship. Somehow, I feel proud. Varian muttered, watching the footage from the Federation and the Order. There are many trashes in my race. Varian's eyes narrowed dangerously, and then he started laughing. But again, they are only a minority. After calming down, his face turned gloomy. While he was happy with how people reacted, the ground reality was indeed dangerous. Especially for Uranus. Boo, any reports on the secret realms and Sequoias? Varian propped his chin on his palm and asked. 2 developments, Master. Boo floated in front of him, its small white figure exuding a rare solemnity. Varian frowned and gestured it to go on. Firstly, there's a meeting between the Shadow Order and Chaos families. Secondly, the Sequoias will be shipped after 6 hours. After hearing the first news, Varian's eyes narrowed. Shadow Order and Chaos families, the big bosses of Uranus cluster. Since the findings a few days ago, Varian was wary of their actions against the cluster cities. If they really attacked the 20 cluster cities, even Shadow Order and Chaos families would be destroyed. It was a stupid move. Yet, Varian didn't strike off the possibility. What if these terrorists actually got desperate and want to die? When is the meeting? He asked, tapping the armrest. It's ongoing. I just found about it from this new secret realm. Boo explained, pointing to the last of the 10 coordinates. They've found 10 secret realms so far, with the 10th one only found 20 minutes ago. This number was far higher compared to the 4 of Earth. But each of these 10 secret realms were significantly smaller than their Earth counterparts. Let's go. Varian instructed, and the ghost ship took off. They followed a space shuttle that was delivering goods to that secret realm and entered it. Shadow Order had a habit of not recording the solar coordinates of their secret realm. Instead, they had the tokens of the secret realms and some other treasures that helped them navigate. So, if they wanted to enter a secret realm, Ghost Ship must follow someone who already knew its location. Thankfully, Boo's stealth made it rather easy and they smoothly entered the 11th secret realm. Do your best. Facing the cluster cities, we'll have great losses. But they're too important to give up. A silver-haired man said, glancing at the 3 people in the conference room. There was also a 4th person, but that man was largely silent and seemed to be lost in thought. You know how hard it's to bring up our family's strength? Scarlet, the head of Shaw family, tilted her head, causing her long red hair touch the conference table. Following her question, the other 2 family heads stared at Draven with intense eyes. They were willing to bear the losses, provided they were given enticing rewards. Draven knew them all too well. So, he didn't beat around the bush and stated. Uranus Abyss will provide you with more than 100 Siloe potions each. 100? Scarlet's breathing turned rapid and her cheeks flushed. The white-haired old man and the brown-haired middle-aged man both looked at Draven with wide eyes. Luther, the white-haired old man, was the quickest to calm himself and ask. How many over 100? 200? 300? 900? Draven paused for a moment and sneaked at the silent man in the room. Seeing no response from him, he shook his head and answered. Depends on your performance. The minimum is 100. The rest is up to you. A fucking 100? Diluted or all level 8? Original. Level 8. If you make use of it properly, you can create at least 50 level 8s.